Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time to an America that would make your worst summer heatwave feel like a gentle spring afternoon. Imagine this. It is late June, somewhere in the 1840s, and you are lying in a cramped upstairs bedroom. The air does not move. It has not moved in 3 days. Your cotton nightshirt clings to your body like a second skin, and the straw-stuffed mattress beneath you has absorbed so much of your sweat that it feels vaguely alive. Outside, the cicadas are screaming their endless summer song, and somewhere in the darkness, a mosquito is circling your ear with the patience of a tiny blood-hungry saint. You probably will not survive this, or at least you will spend the next few months sincerely wishing you had not. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing how this community spans the globe, from people winding down in Tokyo to night owls in Texas. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, and the first thing you register is the weight of the air itself. It presses against your chest like a warm, damp blanket that someone has forgotten to remove. The bedroom you occupy, if you can call this cramped space a bedroom, sits on the second floor of a modest wooden farmhouse somewhere in rural Pennsylvania. Historians still argue whether average Americans of this era truly understood how dangerous summer heat could be, or whether they simply accepted suffering as an unavoidable part of existence. Either way, you are about to find out firsthand. The walls around you are whitewashed plaster, and during the day they seem almost cheerful. But now, in the thick darkness of a June night, they feel like the interior of an oven that someone forgot to turn off. Heat rises, you see, and that is a principle your ancestors understood intimately, even if they could not articulate the physics. Every degree of warmth generated by the kitchen stove, by the bodies of your family members, by the summer sun beating against the roof, all of it has floated upward and settled here, in this room, where you're attempting the impossible task of sleep. You push yourself upright, and the motion alone causes fresh beads of sweat to form along your hairline. The window beside your bed is open, of course. Every window in the house is open. But the night air outside is just as still and heavy as the air inside, so the opening serves less as ventilation, and more as an invitation for every flying insect in the county to come visit. A moth bumps lazily against the glass of your oil lamp, which you extinguished hours ago but which still radiates a faint warmth. Everything radiates warmth. The floorboards radiate warmth. Your own body, traitor that it is, radiates warmth. Here is something your 21st century mind might struggle to accept. There is no escape. You cannot walk to a thermostat and nudge the temperature down a few degrees. You cannot open a refrigerator and stand in front of it, letting the cold air wash over your face like a blessing. You cannot even drive to a movie theatre or a shopping mall, those great cathedrals of air-conditioned relief, because none of those things exist yet. The concept of mechanically cooling air is still decades away from practical reality, and even when it arrives, it will be reserved for factories and wealthy eccentrics, not ordinary people trying to sleep through a Pennsylvania summer. So what do? You adapt, you endure, you develop strategies that would seem absurd to anyone with access to central air, but which make perfect sense when the alternative is simply lying still and slowly cooking. The first strategy is already in motion. You are awake. Not because you want to be, but because your body has learned, through generations of inherited wisdom, that the coolest hours of the day are the ones just before and just after dawn. If you can manage to sleep during the hottest part of the afternoon, a practice that seems lazy to Northern Europeans but which makes profound biological sense, then you can afford to be awake now in the marginally less oppressive darkness. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, and your feet touch wooden floorboards that are merely warm rather than actively hot. Progress. Across the room, you can make out the shape of your younger brother, sprawled diagonally across his own mattress like someone who has given up on dignity entirely. His mouth is open, and a thin line of drool connects his lip to the pillow. You do not judge him. You have looked exactly the same way every night this week, moving quietly, not out of consideration for your brother, who could sleep through a cannon blast, but because the floorboards creak and you do not wish to wake your mother downstairs. You make your way to the window. The night sky's clear, which is both a blessing and a curse. Clear skies mean no rain, and rain would bring temporary relief, a few hours of cooler temperatures, and the excuse to stand outside with your face turned upward, letting the drops wash away the accumulated grime of summer. But clear skies also mean the sun will rise tomorrow, with nothing to soften its assault, and by noon, this bedroom will be genuinely uninhabitable. You lean against the windowsill and look out at the world. The farm stretches before you in shades of grey and black. The cornfields a dark mass against the slightly lighter sky. Somewhere out there, the chickens are sleeping in their coop, and the pigs are sleeping in their pen, and the family cow is sleeping standing up, because cows are strange creatures who never fully commit to rest. All of them are as hot as you are. None of them have any more options than you do, a quirky detail that might surprise you. Some families in this era have begun experimenting with sleeping outside entirely, not in tents or shelters, but simply dragging their mattresses onto the porch or into the yard, gambling that the open air will provide more relief than the trapped heat of indoor rooms. It works, mostly. The ground radiates less heat than a wooden structure, and any slight breeze feels like a gift from heaven when you're not surrounded by walls. The downside, of course, is that you are now sleeping outside, exposed to whatever creatures, weather or nosy neighbours might happen by. Dignity in summer is a luxury few can afford. You remain at the window for a long moment, letting the stillness settle around you. In the distance a dog barks, once, twice, then falls silent. The sound carries strangely in the heavy air, seeming both close and impossibly far away. You think about the day ahead, about the chores that wait for you, about the endless cycle of work and heat and sleep that defines these summer months. It is exhausting just to contemplate, which is perhaps why you are standing here instead of lying back down. But here is the thing about 1800s summer that modern minds often miss. It was not just uncomfortable, it was genuinely dangerous. Heat stroke was a real and present threat, especially for those who worked outdoors. Infants and elderly people died in numbers that would horrify modern statisticians. Food spoiled, water sources dried up or became contaminated, and diseases that thrived in warm weather swept through communities with terrifying speed. Summer was not a season of vacation and leisure for most Americans. It was a season of survival, an annual test of endurance that everyone simply expected to face. And yet people found ways to cope. They built their homes with summer in mind, designing structures that maximized airflow and minimized heat absorption. They adjusted their schedules, waking early and resting during the worst heat. They developed foods and drinks specifically suited to hot weather, concoctions that sound strange to modern ears, but which actually worked surprisingly well. They created social rituals around the shared experience of suffering through summer together, finding community in collective misery. You will experience all of this in the hours and days ahead. You will learn the rhythms of a world without air conditioning, the small victories and daily defeats that defined summer life for millions of Americans across the 19th century. Some of it will seem primitive, even barbaric from your modern perspective. Some of it will seem surprisingly clever. All of it will give you a new appreciation for the simple miracle of climate control, that invisible technology that has fundamentally transformed human existence in ways we rarely stop to consider. But for now, you're still standing at the window watching the darkness, waiting for the first hint of dawn to lighten the eastern sky. The night is not getting any cooler, but it is not getting any warmer either, and in summer, sometimes holding steady is the best you can hope for. Your brother snores behind you, a wet, rattling sound that suggests he might be catching a cold despite the heat. You make a mental note to tell your mother, who will dose him with some foul-tasting remedy that probably will not help, but which will make everyone feel like something is being done. The cicadas continue their chorus, that rising and falling drone that serves as the soundtrack to every American summer. Historians believe the sound was even louder in the 1800s, before urbanization and pesticides reduced insect populations. Imagine that, an even more relentless wall of sound, filling every moment of every summer day and night. It would drive you mad if you let it, but you do not let it. You have learned, as your parents learned, as their parents learned, to filter the noise into background static, something your brain acknowledges but does not process. Dawn is still an hour away at least. You could go back to bed, but the thought of lying on that damp mattress again fills you with something close to despair. Instead, you decide to go downstairs, to the kitchen, where the residual heat of yesterday's cooking has had more time to dissipate. Maybe you will pump some water from the well and splash your face. Maybe you will step outside and stand in the yard, letting the pre-dawn darkness envelop you. Maybe you will simply sit in a chair and wait for the sun, preparing yourself mentally for another day of heat. Whatever you choose, this much is certain. Summer in 1800s America is not a season you simply experience. It is a season you survive, and your survival has just begun. The stairs creak beneath your feet as you descend, each wooden step protesting your weight with a groan that seems impossibly loud in the pre-dawn quiet. You pause halfway down, listening for any sign that you have disturbed the household, but the only sounds are the continued drone of insects outside and the slow, rhythmic breathing of your parents in their ground floor bedroom. Their door is closed, though you know their window is open, just like every window in this house. Closed doors in summer are not about privacy. They are about directing whatever faint breeze might exist, channeling air through the structure in ways that your ancestors understood through trial and error rather than formal education. This house, you realise, was built to fight summer. Every architectural choice, from the height of the ceilings to the placement of the windows, represents a strategy against heat. And as you reach the ground floor and feel the air, still warm but noticeably less suffocating than the second story, you begin to appreciate just how much thought went into these decisions. The ceilings in this farmhouse are 10 feet high, which seems extravagant until you remember the basic physics of heat. Warm air rises. In a room with an 8-foot ceiling, that warm air hovers just above your head, pressing down on you, making every breath feel laboured. But add 2 more feet of vertical space, and suddenly, that pocket of hot air is further away, separated from your living space by a cushion of slightly cooler atmosphere. It is not air conditioning, it is not even close, but it is the difference between miserable and unbearable, and in summer, those distinctions matter enormously. You move through the parlour, running your hand along the whitewashed wall. The colour choice is deliberate too. White reflects heat, while darker colours absorb it. A house painted deep red or forest green would cook its inhabitants even faster than this one does. Your family cannot afford to repaint every few years. Whitewash fades and flakes, requiring constant maintenance, but they do it anyway because the alternative is worse. Historians still argue whether the ubiquitous white farmhouses of rural America were primarily an aesthetic choice or a practical one. But standing here in the pre-dawn dimness, you know the answer. Beauty is a luxury. Survival is not. The windows in this house are tall and narrow, positioned directly across from each other to create what architects call cross-ventilation. When the wind blows, and it will blow eventually, though tonight it seems to have taken a vacation, it enters through one window and exits through the opposite one, pulling the stale interior air along with it. This is why you see the same window arrangement in farmhouses throughout the mid-Atlantic and the South. Structures built by people who had never heard of thermodynamics, but who understood its principles intimately through lived experience. But here is a quirky detail that might surprise you. Not everyone in 1800s America lives in houses designed for summer. In the northern states, where winters are brutal and summers relatively mild, homes were built to retain heat rather than dispel it. Low ceilings, small windows, heavy construction that keeps the warmth inside during those long frozen months. These houses are cosy and efficient from October through April. But when summer arrives, they transform into ovens. Families in Vermont and Maine, who spend most of the year grateful for their snug little homes, suddenly find themselves trapped in structures that seem designed to maximize their discomfort. The South, by contrast, developed architectural traditions that prioritize summer survival above all else. The dog trot cabin, which you may have seen in old photographs or historical recreations, is a perfect example. Imagine 2 log structures connected by a single roof, with an open breezeway running between them. This central passage, the dog trot, serves as a shaded outdoor room, a place to sit during the heat of the day, protected from direct sun but open to whatever wind might pass through. Dogs would lie in this breezeway to escape the heat, hence the name, though humans used it just as eagerly. You step into the kitchen, and immediately the temperature seems to rise. Even now, hours after the last fire was extinguished, the cast-iron stove radiates warmth like a small, malevolent sun. During the day, when your mother is cooking, this room becomes genuinely dangerous. Temperatures that can exceed 120 degrees, air thick with smoke and steam, the constant risk of burns from hot metal and open flame. You will experience that particular hell later today. For now, you're grateful that the stove sits cold and dark, its iron bulk merely warm rather than actively hostile. The kitchen floor is dirt packed hard and smooth by years of foot traffic. This is not a sign of poverty. Though wealthy families might have wooden or even stone floors in their kitchens, dirt floors are cooler than wood, absorbing less heat and releasing it more slowly. Some families sprinkle water on their dirt floors during summer days, a practice called dampening down that provides temporary relief through evaporative cooling. The water evaporates, pulling heat from the air, and for a few blessed minutes the kitchen feels almost bearable. Then the water is gone, the heat returns, and you must dampen down again. It is an endless, exhausting cycle, but it works, and in summer anything that works is precious. You move to the back door and step outside into the pre-dawn darkness. The air here is the same temperature as the air inside, but it feels different somehow. Less trapped, less stale. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with oxygen that does not taste like yesterday's cooking and last night's sweat. Above you, the stars are fading as the eastern horizon begins to lighten. The first hint of the day that will soon consume all of your attention and energy. The farmhouse faces south, which is deliberate. Southern exposure means the front of the house receives sunlight throughout the day, but the rear, where you are standing now, where the kitchen is located, where most of the actual living happens during summer, remains in shade for most of the afternoon. Porches run along both the front and back of the house, providing additional shaded space and creating a buffer zone between the interior rooms and the direct assault of sunlight. You take a seat on the back porch steps, feeling the wood cool beneath you, and watch the sky slowly transform from black to grey to pale pink. Somewhere in the distance a rooster begins to crow, that ancient alarm clock that has marked human mornings for thousands of years. Other roosters answer, a chain of calls spreading across the countryside, and you know that soon the whole community will be awake, rising to meet another summer day. But for now, in this brief window between night and dawn, you have the world almost to yourself. The well sits about 30 feet from the back porch, a stone-lined hole in the earth covered by a wooden platform and topped with a hand pump. Water from this well is cool, startlingly so considering the ambient temperature, because it comes from deep underground where the summer heat cannot reach. Historians note that access to cool well water was one of the few genuine luxuries available to rural Americans in summer, a natural form of refrigeration that required no technology more advanced than a hole in the ground and a bucket. You walk to the well and work the pump handle, listening to the squeak of metal against metal and the gurgle of water rising through the pipe. After a few strokes, cold water gushes from the spout and you cup your hands beneath it, splashing your face, letting the liquid run down your neck and soak the collar of your nightshirt. The sensation is so pleasurable, so purely refreshing, that you almost laugh out loud. This is the closest thing to air conditioning that exists in your world, and you intend to enjoy it fully. Some families, particularly those with means, have developed elaborate systems for using well water to cool their homes. They run pipes from the well through interior rooms, letting the cold water absorb heat before returning it to the ground. Others suspend containers of food and drink in the well itself, keeping them cold through direct contact with groundwater. These are the early ancestors of the refrigerator, improvised solutions born from desperation and ingenuity. But most families, your family included, simply appreciate the well for what it is, a source of cold water in a world where cold anything is rare and precious. You pump a tin cup full and drink deeply, feeling the chill spread through your chest, a small island of relief in the ocean of summer heat. The sky continues to brighten, and with it comes the first hint of what the day will bring. Already you can feel the temperature beginning to rise, the cool of night giving way to the warmth that will build and build until afternoon, when the air itself seems to shimmer and the shade beneath the trees becomes the most valuable real estate in the county. You return to the porch and sit again, watching the farm emerge from darkness. The barn takes shape first, a massive structure that houses the horses and stores the hay, and serves as the centre of agricultural life. Beyond it, the fields stretch toward the horizon, corn and wheat and vegetables growing in the rich Pennsylvania soil. All of this will require your attention today, your labour and sweat and aching muscles. But not yet. For now, you can sit and breathe and prepare yourself mentally for the hours ahead. The architecture of heat survival extends beyond individual homes, you realise. Entire communities are arranged to maximise shade and airflow, with tree-lined streets and public squares designed to provide relief during the hottest months. Churches leave their doors open during summer services, not from welcoming spirit but from practical necessity, allowing congregations to breathe while they worship. Schools dismiss early or close entirely during heat waves because no one can learn when they are slowly cooking in an overcrowded classroom. This is a world built around summer, shaped by summer, defined by summer, and you're about to step fully into it, leaving behind the relative comfort of the pre-dawn hours and entering the full heat of an 1800s American day. Your mother's voice calls from inside the house, and you know that your brief respite has ended. The day has begun. Your mother stands in the kitchen doorway, her hair already pinned up in a practical bun, her face set in the expression of determined efficiency that defines her every summer morning. She's been awake for at least an hour, you realise, probably longer. While you were upstairs wrestling with the heat and losing, she was down here preparing for the day, organising tasks, setting priorities. This is what survival looks like. Rising before the sun, working while the air is still breathable, accomplishing as much as possible before the real heat descends. "Well," she says, looking at your damp nightshirt and dripping face, "at least you've discovered the pump. Breakfast in 20 minutes. You nod and head back upstairs to dress, passing your brother on the stairs. He's awake now, barely, his eyes still half closed as he stumbles toward the kitchen. Neither of you speaks. There is an unwritten understanding in summer households that morning conversation should be minimal, that energy spent on words is energy not available for the work ahead. You will talk later, during the midday rest, when the heat forces everyone inside and there is nothing to do but sit and wait and perhaps play cards or read from the family Bible. Your bedroom is already warmer than it was when you left, the rising sun beginning to heat the roof above you. You dress quickly, choosing clothes that seem laughably inappropriate for the weather, but which are simply what people wear in this era. A cotton shirt, loose but still long-sleeved, because exposing your arms to direct sunlight invites painful burns. Wool trousers, yes, wool, even in summer, because wool is what trousers are made from, and cotton pants sturdy enough for farm work do not yet exist in affordable forms. Suspenders to hold the trousers up because belts would add another layer of constricting fabric around your waist. Sturdy leather boots because you cannot work a farm barefoot no matter how much your feet might prefer it. The result is an outfit that would make a modern person weep with sympathy. You're about to spend 10 to 12 hours doing hard physical labour in weather that would prompt heat advisories and health warnings in the 21st century, and you are dressed like you are attending a slightly casual 19th century funeral. This is simply how it is. Fashion and function rarely align in the 1800s, and when they conflict, fashion usually wins, at least for now. You descend the stairs again and enter the kitchen, where your mother is already working over a small fire in the stove. The room has heated dramatically in the few minutes since you were last here, and you understand now why she called you in. The goal is to finish cooking before the stove makes the kitchen uninhabitable, to produce a meal that will sustain the family through the morning's work and then extinguish the fire before it transforms this room into a genuine health hazard. Breakfast is corn mush, leftover cornmeal from yesterday, fried in a pan until the edge is crisp. There is buttermilk to drink, kept cool overnight in the root cellar, and a slice of ham that was smoked last autumn and has been slowly disappearing ever since. It is a substantial meal, heavier than anything you might eat for breakfast in your own time, because the work ahead requires fuel. You will burn through these calories before noon and wish for more. Your father enters the kitchen already dressed for the fields, his face red from the quick wash at the pump. He nods at you and takes his seat at the table, saying nothing. Your brother joins moments later, and the four of you eat in near silence, focused on the food and the day ahead. Through the open window you can hear the farm waking up around you. Chickens clucking, pigs grunting, the horses in the barn stamping restlessly. They know, as you know, that the easy part of the day is already ending. Here is what your morning schedule looks like, and it may shock you with its intensity. The moment breakfast ends, and it ends quickly, because no one wants to linger in this increasingly hot kitchen, you will head to the barn for the first round of animal care. Horses need to be fed and watered, cows need to be milked, pigs need their slop, and chickens need their feed, and all of these tasks need to happen now before the sun climbs high enough to make the barn dangerously warm. You will notice that farmers in this era do not keep many animals inside during summer days. The horses will go out to pasture as soon as possible, where they can find shade under trees and access to the pond at the far end of the property. The cows will follow, grazing in the cooler morning hours and sheltering under whatever cover they can find during the afternoon. Even the pigs, despite their reputation for loving mud and muck, prefer to avoid the worst heat, retreating to the shade of their shelter and moving as little as possible until evening. Your father leads the way to the barn and you follow, already feeling sweat begin to gather at your temples. The sun is fully up now, a pale yellow disk that does not yet carry its full afternoon fury, but which promises nothing good. You have perhaps 4 hours of tolerable working conditions ahead, maybe 5 if clouds roll in. After that, the day becomes a matter of survival rather than productivity. The barn is cooler than the house was, which surprises you until you remember its construction. Thick walls, high ceilings, multiple doors and windows that create cross-ventilation on a massive scale. Barns are designed for animals, and animals cannot sweat like humans can. If the barn becomes too hot, livestock will sicken and die, representing catastrophic economic loss for a farming family. So barns are built to maximise cooling, with more care and attention paid to animal comfort than most farmhouses give to human residents. Historians still argue whether this represents indifference to human suffering or simply a practical calculation of priorities. A farmer can suffer through a hot summer and emerge weakened but alive. A horse that overheats may die, taking with it years of training and hundreds of dollars of value. In a world where agricultural labour is the foundation of economic survival, animals are assets in a way that human comfort is not. You milk the cows, your fingers finding the familiar rhythm as warm milk hisses into the pail. The cows are restless, twitching their tails against the flies that cluster around their hindquarters, but they tolerate the milking without complaint. They have done this every morning of their lives, and the routine is comforting even in unpleasant conditions. When you finish, you carry the pails to the root cellar beneath the house, where the cool underground temperature will keep the milk from spoiling. At least until afternoon, when even the cellar begins to warm. Root cellars are one of the unsung heroes of 1800 summer survival. Dug deep into the earth, they maintain temperatures between 50 and 60 degrees year-round, providing a natural refrigerator for dairy, vegetables and other perishable foods. Wealthy families might have ice houses, structures packed with blocks of ice cut from frozen ponds and insulated with sawdust. But root cellars require no ice, no special construction, just a hole in the ground and the patience to dig it. By the time you emerge from the cellar, the morning is fully underway. Your brother is feeding the pigs, your father is harnessing the horses, and your mother, who finished in the kitchen and joined the outdoor work, is gathering eggs from the chicken coop. This is the daily choreography of farm life, each family member knowing their role, each task completed in the order that makes the most sense given the rising heat. The next few hours will be devoted to field work, assuming the heat allows. Your father has been watching the wheat, which is nearly ready for harvest, and today you may begin cutting, or you may simply walk the fields checking for problems, insects, disease, damage from last week's brief storm. The decision will depend on how quickly the temperature rises, on whether the morning clouds provide any meaningful shade, on a dozen small factors that your father reads instinctively, but which seem like arcane mysteries to you. What strikes you most about this morning routine is its efficiency. Every motion is purposeful, every task sequenced to maximize productivity during the coolest hours. There is no wasted time, no leisurely second cup of coffee, no checking of phones or reading of news. The sun is rising, the heat is coming, and everything that can be done now must be done now because later will be impossible. Your father calls your name, and you jog over to where he stands with the horses. The animals are harnessed to a simple wagon, loaded with tools for field work. You climb onto the seat beside him, and with a click of his tongue the horses begin to move. The farm stretches before you, golden and green in the early morning light, and despite everything, the heat, the exhaustion, the endless work, there is a strange beauty to this moment. The world is quiet except for birdsong and the creak of wagon wheels. The air, while warm, still carries a hint of nighttime coolness, and ahead of you lies another day of survival in a world that gives nothing freely, that demands everything you have and more, but which also offers moments of peace and connection that modern life often lacks. You will hold on to this moment, you decide. You will remember it later when the sun is directly overhead, and the air feels like soup and every muscle in your body screams for rest. You will remember that there was beauty here too amid the suffering. The wagon rolls toward the wheat fields and your day truly begins. The wagon rattles over a rutted path, and with each bump you feel the wool of your trousers rub against your thighs. Already, in these early hours, you are aware of the fabric in a way that would seem obsessive to your modern sensibilities. The weave is coarse but not unbearably so, designed for durability rather than comfort. By noon, you will feel as though you are wearing sandpaper. By evening, you will have developed a rash that will take days to heal. This is simply part of summer life in an era when clothing technology prioritizes longevity over anything resembling breathability. Your modern mind screams a simple question. Why not just wear less? Why not strip down to cotton shorts and a thin shirt, the way anyone with sense would do when facing hard labour in extreme heat? The answer, as with so many things in the 1800s, is complicated. A tangle of social expectations, practical considerations, religious beliefs, and genuine ignorance about how the human body manages temperature. Start with social expectations. In this era, exposed skin is scandalous, particularly for women but significantly for men as well. A man who works shirtless is advertising his poverty, his lack of respectable standing. Only the very lowest labourers would strip to the waist, and even then they would face judgment from their social betters. Farmers like your father occupy a middle ground in American society. Not wealthy, but respectable, with aspirations to greater prosperity. Working in minimal clothing would undermine the family's standing in the community, marking them as people who have given up on propriety. Then there are the practical considerations, some of which actually make sense even from a modern perspective. Covering your skin protects it from the sun, reducing the risk of burns that can be debilitating in an era before effective sunscreen or aloe vera gel. Loose, long-sleeved shirts create a layer of air between the fabric and your skin, which can actually provide insulation against external heat while allowing sweat to evaporate. The key word there is loose. Fitted clothing would indeed be worse than bare skin, trapping heat and preventing airflow. But the billowy cotton shirts of rural America are surprisingly well designed for their purpose. Wool trousers, however, are harder to defend. Historians still argue whether wool was worn in summer primarily out of tradition, necessity, or ignorance. The pro-wool argument goes something like this. Wool breathes better than some people assume, wicking moisture away from the skin and maintaining its structure even when wet. Cotton, when it becomes saturated with sweat, clings to the body and loses its shape, becoming uncomfortable in different ways. Wool also resists fire better than cotton, which matters when you spend significant time around open flames and hot metal. The anti-wool argument is simpler. Wool is hot. It is heavy. It traps body heat like a blanket wrapped around your legs. No amount of breathability can compensate for the basic thermal properties of wool fibre, which evolved to keep sheep warm through harsh winters. Wearing wool in an American summer, this argument suggests, is simply a cultural holdover from European climates, a tradition that colonists brought with them and never bothered to abandon. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Cotton was becoming increasingly available and affordable throughout the 19th century, thanks in large part to the horrific expansion of enslaved labour in the southern states. But transforming raw cotton into finished clothing required processing, weaving, cutting and sewing, steps that added cost and time. Many rural families found it easier to buy wool fabric, which was often produced more locally, or to wear older garments that had been passed down through generations. Fashion changes slowly when every item of clothing represents a significant investment of money and labour. What you're wearing, then, is a compromise. Cotton where cotton makes the most sense, wool where tradition and availability dictate, an overall coverage that satisfies the social requirement for modesty, while providing what protection it can against sun and scratch and soil. You are not comfortable. You will not be comfortable at any point today, but you are dressed appropriately for your time and place, and that counts for something. Your mother and sister, back at the house, face even greater sartorial challenges. Women's fashion in the 1800s is a monument to the triumph of appearance over function. Layering upon layering that would be comic if it were not so genuinely dangerous in summer heat. Start at the skin and work outward. First, a shift or chemise, a simple cotton undergarment that provides a layer between the body and the more expensive outer clothes, protecting those garments from sweat and body oils. Over the chemise, drawers, loose cotton pants that extend to mid-calf or below, providing coverage for the lower body. So far, so reasonable, if perhaps warmer than strictly necessary. Now add the corset. In the 1800s, a properly dressed woman wears a corset nearly all the time, a structured garment of canvas, whalebone, and sometimes metal that moulds the torso into the fashionable silhouette of the era. Corsets restrict breathing, limit movement, and concentrate body heat in ways that would qualify as torture under modern definitions. Yet women wear them anyway, because the alternative, appearing in public without a corset, marks one as improper, low-class, possibly immoral. There are reform movements beginning to question the necessity of corsets, but they are fringe movements, and their arguments have not yet penetrated rural Pennsylvania. Over the corset, petticoats. Multiple petticoats sometimes, depending on current fashion, and the desired fullness of the skirt. Each petticoat adds another layer of fabric, another barrier to airflow, another opportunity for body heat to become trapped against the skin. On top of the petticoats, finally the dress itself, usually made of heavier fabric than the undergarments, often featuring long sleeves and a high neckline because exposed skin on women is even more scandalous than on men. The result is an ensemble that can easily include 6 or 7 distinct layers of fabric, creating a personal greenhouse effect that raises body temperature regardless of external conditions. Women in summer are effectively wearing their own private saunas, moving through the world in cocoons of cloth that would be more appropriate for January than July. Historians note that heat-related illness was significantly more common among women than men in this era, for reasons that should be obvious from this description. Fainting, what the Victorians delicately called swooning, was so common that it became a cultural cliché. The fragile woman overcome by emotion or exertion, or the mere presence of a handsome gentleman. In reality, these women were fainting because they could not breathe properly, could not cool themselves effectively, were slowly cooking inside their own clothing, while social expectations demanded they show no discomfort. Some women adapted by wearing lighter fabrics when possible, by loosening their corsets when no one was watching, by spending summer days in the relative privacy of home, where standards could be relaxed. Others simply endured, accepting physical suffering as the price of respectability. A few, radical reformers, health advocates, women who had simply had enough, began to question the entire system, advocating for dress reform that would prioritise function over fashion. But those reforms are decades away from mainstream acceptance. For now, in this 1840s summer, the clothes you and your family wear represent the art of the possible, uncomfortable but manageable for men, borderline dangerous for women, and absolutely non-negotiable in terms of social expectation. The wagon continues its slow progress toward the fields, and you shift on the wooden seat, trying to find a position where the wool does not press quite so directly against your sweat-dampened skin. Your father glances over but says nothing. He's been wearing these same kinds of clothes his entire life, as his father did before him, as his grandfather did before that. The discomfort is simply background noise, a constant that barely registers anymore. You will reach that point too, eventually. You will learn to ignore the fabric, to focus on the task rather than the sensation, to push your awareness of your own body into some back corner of your mind, where it cannot distract from the work that must be done. This is how people have survived summer for centuries, not by eliminating discomfort, but by learning to function despite it. The fields spread out before you, wheat swaying gently in whatever faint breeze exists this morning. Somewhere out there, hidden in the grain, insects are feeding and multiplying. Birds are hunting those insects, mice are burrowing beneath the soil. The entire ecosystem continues its cycles, indifferent to human concerns about heat or fashion or survival. You're just another animal in this system, you realise. Better dressed than most, perhaps, but equally subject to the laws of temperature and energy and endurance. The sun does not care about your social standing. The heat does not respect your modesty. All you can do is adapt, persist, and hope that September arrives before your body gives out. The fieldwork proves mercifully brief this morning. Your father surveys the wheat, running his hands through the golden stalks, breaking off a few heads to examine the kernels inside. He grunts, a sound you have learned to interpret as cautious optimism, and announces that harvest will begin in 3 days, assuming the weather holds. Today is for preparation, sharpening scythes, checking the condition of the wagon bed that will carry the cut grain, making sure everything is ready for the frantic labour that harvest represents. You are grateful for this reprieve, though you know the harvest itself will be brutal. For now, you ride back toward the farmhouse, where another kind of work awaits. The work of surviving the hottest hours of the day, which is in some ways more challenging than physical labour. The kitchen, when you enter it, hits you like a physical force. Your mother has been cooking again, despite the morning meal being finished hours ago. This is the paradox of summer food preparation. Cooking requires fire. Fire produces heat, and heat makes the kitchen uninhabitable. But food must still be prepared or the family will not survive. There is no way around this equation, only through it. Your mother stands before the cast-iron stove which radiates waves of heat visible in the air above it. She's boiling something. Beans from the smell. The same beans that will appear at dinner tonight and possibly again tomorrow. Her face is flushed a deep red, and sweat has soaked through her dress in dark patches that propriety would normally forbid anyone from noticing. But propriety has limits, and summer exceeds them daily. "Out," she says without looking up. "I'll call when it's ready." You retreat to the back porch, where the shade provides some relief, and the occasional breath of wind makes existence marginally more bearable. Your brother is already here, sprawled on the wooden planks like a starfish, his arms spread wide as if to maximize the surface area available for cooling. Your father has disappeared into the barn, probably to work on those scythes, preferring the heat of metal grinding against metal to the heat of his wife's kitchen. The kitchen of an 1800s farmhouse is not merely a room, it is the heart of domestic labour, the place where raw ingredients become edible food, where dirty clothes become clean, where the endless daily tasks of household maintenance are performed, and in summer it is also the most dangerous room in the house. Start with the stove. Cast-iron cook stoves became common in American homes during the early decades of the 19th century, replacing open hearths that had served for centuries. These stoves are technological marvels in their way, more efficient than open fires, better at controlling heat, capable of supporting multiple pots and pans simultaneously. But they are also metal boxes full of burning wood, and metal conducts heat with terrifying efficiency. A cook stove in full operation can easily reach surface temperatures of 300 degrees or more. The air immediately surrounding the stove will be well over 100 degrees, even if the room itself is nominally cooler. Standing close enough to cook means standing close enough to burn, and burns are a constant risk. Your mother's forearms bear scars from a lifetime of small accidents, brushing against hot metal, splashing boiling water, getting too close to open flame. Now consider that stove in context. The kitchen has minimal ventilation, because windows that would allow heat to escape would also allow smoke to linger. The floor is dirt, which stays relatively cool but which also traps moisture, creating a humid atmosphere that prevents sweat from evaporating effectively. The ceiling is low because the kitchen was added to the house as an afterthought, a lean-to structure that does not share the high ceilings of the main rooms. Add to this the requirements of actual cooking. Your mother is not simply heating a single pot of beans. She is baking bread in the stove's oven, a process that requires maintaining consistent high temperatures for an hour or more. She's rendering fat for later use, a task that produces acrid smoke and the risk of grease fires. She's boiling water for cleaning, heating irons for pressing, simmering stock for soup. Each task requires proximity to the stove, and each minute of proximity extracts its toll in sweat and exhaustion. Historians estimate that kitchen temperatures in summer could regularly exceed 120 degrees during peak cooking hours. This is not an exaggeration or a dramatic flourish. This is the measured reality of cooking with wood-fired stoves in poorly ventilated spaces during heat waves. Women died from heat exposure in their own kitchens, collapsed over their stoves with meals half prepared, their bodies unable to maintain the core temperature necessary for survival. And yet cooking continued, because the alternative was starvation. Food does not preserve itself. Meat must be cooked to kill parasites. Vegetables must be processed to extend their usability. Bread must be baked because purchased bread is expensive and often unavailable. The kitchen, for all its dangers, is essential to family survival, and someone must tend it regardless of the cost. That someone in this era is almost always a woman. The gendered division of labour in 1800s, America assigns cooking, cleaning and childcare to wives and mothers, while men handle fieldwork, livestock and heavy construction. This division has deep historical roots and is rarely questioned, even when it places women in demonstrably more dangerous conditions than their male counterparts face. Your mother has developed coping strategies, of course. She cooks as much as possible in the early morning, when temperatures are lower and the stove's heat is less overwhelming. She prepares foods that require minimal cooking, cold salads, cured meats, pickled vegetables, whenever the family's palate and the available ingredients allow. She takes breaks, stepping outside to cool down before returning to the stove, pacing herself through the long hours of kitchen work. But these strategies only mitigate the danger, they do not eliminate it. Every summer brings news of women who have succumbed to kitchen heat. Neighbours, distant relatives, names in newspapers that your mother reads with a mixture of sympathy and grim recognition. There but for the grace of God, she says, and you understand that she means it literally. Here is a quirky detail that illuminates the desperation of summer cooking. Some families in the south and southwest build their kitchens as entirely separate structures, detached from the main house. These summer kitchens keep cooking heat away from sleeping and living spaces, reducing the risk of the entire home becoming uninhabitable. They also reduce the risk of house fires, which claim thousands of homes each year when sparks from cook stoves ignite wooden walls and floors. Your family does not have a summer kitchen. The construction cost would be prohibitive, and the Pennsylvania winters are cold enough that a detached kitchen would be impractical for half the year. So your mother endures, navigating the hellscape of summer, cooking with skill and resignation, emerging each day with meals prepared and no worse injuries than she started with. You watch the kitchen door from your spot on the porch, half expecting to see smoke or flame, prepared to rush in if your mother calls for help. The beans continue to boil, the bread continues to bake, and the temperature continues to rise inside the kitchen and outside it, climbing toward the unbearable peak that will define the next several hours. Your brother has fallen asleep, his breathing slow and even, his body surrendering to the heat rather than fighting it. There is wisdom in this, you suppose. Sleep conserves energy, reduces metabolic heat production, and passes time that would otherwise be spent in conscious misery. If you could sleep through every summer afternoon, you would probably do so. But sleep eludes you for now. You're too aware of the heat, too conscious of your own discomfort, too worried about your mother in that terrible kitchen. So you sit and you wait and you watch the sun climb higher in the sky, knowing that the worst is yet to come. The word ice in 1840s, America carries a weight that modern ears cannot fully appreciate. It is not simply frozen water, not merely a convenience for chilling drinks or preserving food. It is a luxury, a marvel, a substance that borders on the miraculous for the vast majority of people who will never taste cold lemonade or feel ice against their skin during the brutal months of summer. You have heard of ice, of course. Everyone has heard of ice. In winter it forms naturally on ponds and streams, and children play on it, and adults curse it when it makes roads treacherous. But that winter ice melts with the spring thaw, disappearing as inevitably as snow and cold temperatures, leaving behind only memories of the season past. The idea of ice in summer, ice in July, ice in August, ice when you need it most desperately, seems as fantastical as flying machines or electric lights. And yet ice exists in summer, for those who can afford it. This is one of the great paradoxes of 1800s America. In a world without refrigeration, a thriving ice industry has emerged to bring frozen water to people who have never seen a natural winter freeze. The story begins in New England, where winters are cold enough and long enough to produce thick, clear ice on lakes and ponds. Entrepreneurs, the most famous being a Boston merchant named Frederick Tudor, realized in the early 19th century that this ice could be harvested, insulated, transported and sold to customers hundreds or even thousands of miles away. What started as the eccentric experiment became a multi-million-dollar industry, with ice ships sailing from Boston to Charleston to New Orleans to the Caribbean, even to India and beyond. Here is how it works. In winter, crews of labourers descend on frozen lakes with specialised saws and cutting tools. They score the ice in a grid pattern, then cut blocks of uniform size, typically about 2 feet by 3 feet, weighing several hundred pounds each. These blocks are loaded onto sledges, transported to ice houses near the shore, and packed in sawdust or hay, which provides insulation against the inevitable warming. Ice houses are engineering marvels of their own, thick-walled structures dug partially into the ground, designed to maintain temperatures just above freezing, even as summer heat rages outside. The best ice houses can preserve ice for months, losing only a fraction of their inventory to melting. The worst lose everything by July, leaving their owners with empty buildings and ruined investments. From ice houses, the blocks travel by ship, wagon, and eventually railroad to their destinations. Each stage of the journey involves melting losses, each mile adding to the cost of the final product. By the time New England ice reaches a wealthy household in Virginia or Georgia, it has travelled hundreds of miles, passed through dozens of hands, and acquired a price tag that places it firmly in the category of luxury goods. Historians still argue whether the ice trade was genuinely profitable for most participants, or whether it represented a speculative bubble that enriched a few pioneers while ruining countless imitators. The evidence suggests both. Fortunes were made and lost, companies rose and collapsed, and the industry as a whole transformed American expectations about food and drink, even as individual businesses struggled to survive. What matters for you, sweating on a Pennsylvania porch in the 1840s, is that ice exists as a concept, a possibility, a symbol of comfort that remains tantalizingly out of reach. Your family cannot afford to purchase ice with any regularity. The nearest ice dealer is in town, miles away, and his prices reflect the costs of transportation and storage. Occasionally, for special occasions, a 4th of July celebration, a wedding, the visit of important guests, your father might splurge on a small block, watching as it melts slowly in a tub of water, treasuring every moment of coolness it provides. But regular ice consumption, daily cold drinks, food preservation through refrigeration, these are fantasies for people like you, luxuries that require either wealth or geography that your family does not possess. The wealthy, of course, have different experiences. In cities like Boston and New York, fashionable households maintain ice boxes, insulated cabinets, where blocks of ice keep perishable foods cold and fresh. These ice boxes require regular deliveries, often daily in summer, creating employment for icemen who make rounds through affluent neighborhoods, carrying dripping blocks on their shoulders and leaving wet trails on sidewalks. Ice cream parlors have begun appearing in American cities, temples of cold where the fortunate can purchase frozen confections that seem almost magical in their contradiction of summer heat. The first ice cream socials are being held, gatherings where ice cream serves as both refreshment and status symbol, proof that the host can afford this most expensive of summer treats. Even in the South, where winter rarely produces natural ice, the wealthy manage to obtain it. Ships from New England dock in Charleston and Savannah and New Orleans, their holds packed with slowly melting cargo that nonetheless arrives in sufficient quantity to supply mansions and hotels. The contrast between a southern plantation house, where iced drinks are served to guests on silver trays, and the slave quarters behind it, where ice is unknown and water comes lukewarm from wells, illustrates the brutal inequalities of 1800s American life. You will not experience ice today, or this week, or probably this month, but the knowledge of its existence colours your understanding of summer in ways that might surprise you. Ice represents what is possible, what technology and commerce can achieve when properly motivated. It suggests that human ingenuity might someday find solutions to problems that currently seem insurmountable. It offers hope, even if that hope remains unrealised for people in your circumstances. For now, you settle for the next best thing: well water, pumped from deep underground, cool enough to provide modest relief without the miraculous coldness of actual ice. You drink deeply, letting the water fill your stomach and spread its relative coolness through your core. It is not ice. It is not even close to ice. But it is what you have, and in summer, gratitude for small blessings is essential to maintaining sanity. Your mother emerges from the kitchen, her face flushed but triumphant. The beans are done, the bread is baked, and the stove is finally cooling. She pours herself water from the pump, drinks it standing up, and then sits heavily on the porch steps beside you. "Hot enough to cook an egg on the walkway," she says, a phrase you have heard her use every summer for as long as you can remember. "Think you could, though?" your brother asks, suddenly awake, interested in the scientific possibility rather than the metaphorical complaint. Your mother considers this. "Probably not," she admits. "The egg would just sit there and eventually rot. You need sustained heat, not just surface temperature." This is the kind of practical wisdom that defines life in the 1800s. Detailed knowledge about heat and cooking and the behaviour of food, acquired through years of daily experience rather than formal education. Your mother may not be able to explain the physics of heat transfer, but she understands it intuitively, knows exactly how long bread needs to bake, and how hot the stove must be, and how quickly milk will sour in summer versus winter. The afternoon stretches before you, long and hot and relatively empty. The heavy work of the morning is done. The heavy work of the evening, another round of animal care, preparation for tomorrow's labour, lies hours away. In between is the dead zone, the period when the sun is directly overhead and the heat is at its worst, and everyone with sense retreats indoors or to the deepest shade they can find. This is siesta time, though no one in Pennsylvania uses that word. This is the afternoon rest that makes summer survival possible. The pause that allows bodies to cool and minds to wander, and spirits to recover from the relentless assault of heat. You close your eyes and listen to the sounds of summer. Insects buzzing, a distant cow lowing, the creak of the porch as your mother shifts position. The heat is still there, still pressing against you, still demanding attention. But for this moment, you can almost ignore it. Almost. Thirst arrives with the subtlety of a hammer blow. One moment you're resting on the porch, eyes closed, mind drifting somewhere between consciousness and sleep. The next moment, every cell in your body is screaming for water, demanding hydration with an urgency that cuts through the heat, induced lethargy and forces you to move. You stumble to the pump, work the handle, and drink directly from the spout, a breach of etiquette that your mother would normally correct, but which summer has rendered acceptable. The water is cool, blessedly cool, pulled from an aquifer that knows nothing of July heat or August drought. You drink until your stomach aches, then drink a little more, knowing that the moisture will leave your body almost as quickly as it entered, evaporating through skin and breath, and the simple act of existing in temperatures that your physiology was never designed to endure. Water in 1840s, America is simultaneously abundant and scarce, easily accessible and potentially deadly. This paradox defines summer life in ways that modern minds, accustomed to turning a tap and receiving clean water on demand, struggle to fully appreciate. Start with the abundance. America in this era is blessed with water resources that Europeans found almost incomprehensible. Rivers that stretch for thousands of miles, lakes so vast they function as inland seas, aquifers that seem bottomless. Rain falls reliably in most regions, filling streams and replenishing groundwater. Wells dug almost anywhere east of the Mississippi will eventually hit water, and the water they find is usually plentiful enough to serve a family's needs. But abundant does not mean safe. The water you're drinking right now, pumped from a well on your family's property, has travelled through soil and rock formations on its way to the aquifer. Along that journey, it may have picked up minerals that give it a distinctive taste. Iron, sulphur, calcium that leaves white deposits on everything it touches. It may also have picked up something worse. Cholera bacteria, invisible and deadly, thrive in water contaminated by human waste. Typhoid fever spreads through the same mechanism. Dysentery, giardia, and a dozen other waterborne diseases wait in water sources that look perfectly clear and taste perfectly fine, betraying no hint of the pathogens they carry. You cannot see bacteria, you cannot smell them, you cannot taste them until it is far too late, until you are lying in bed with cramps and fever and the terrifying certainty that your body is failing you. This is the summer killer that claims more American lives than heat stroke ever could. Historians estimate that waterborne diseases caused tens of thousands of deaths annually in the 1800s, with summer being the peak season. Warm temperatures encourage bacterial growth. Drought concentrates contaminants in diminished water supplies. The combination of heat exhaustion and dehydration weakens immune systems, making infections more dangerous when they occur. Your well, you tell yourself, is safe. Your family has drunk from it for years without incident. The aquifer is deep, the water is filtered through layers of rock and soil, and no one in the immediate area has experienced the kind of illness that would suggest contamination. But you tell yourself this partly as faith, partly as necessity. You have no way to test the water, no method of treating it beyond boiling, and boiling water in a summer kitchen would defeat the entire purpose of drinking it for cooling relief. So you drink, and you hope, and you watch your family members for any signs of illness, ready to act if anyone develops the symptoms that could signal something worse than ordinary summer malaise. Beyond your well, water acquisition becomes more complicated. The nearest stream is about a mile away, flowing through a neighbour's property before joining a larger creek that eventually empties into a river you've never visited. Stream water is unreliable. It can dry up in drought, become contaminated by upstream activity, or carry debris and sediment that makes it undrinkable without significant processing. Towns and cities face even greater challenges. Urban wells quickly become contaminated by the accumulated waste of dense populations. Human sewage, animal waste, industrial runoff, all of it seeping into groundwater that serves thousands of people simultaneously. Cities that lack rivers or lakes must import water from distant sources, constructing aqueducts and pipelines that represent enormous engineering achievements and enormous ongoing expenses. Philadelphia, which you have visited once, and which seems impossibly large and crowded to your rural sensibilities, draws its water from the Schuylkill River, pumping it through a system of reservoirs and pipes that represent the cutting edge of municipal engineering. But even this sophisticated system cannot guarantee safety. The river receives runoff from farms and factories upstream. The pipes that carry water to homes may be contaminated by their own construction materials. The residents of Philadelphia, despite their technological advantages, sicken and die from waterborne illness just as regularly as anyone else. Here is a quirky detail that illuminates the state of water knowledge in this era. Many people believe that bad air rather than bad water causes summer diseases. The miasma theory, which attributes illness to foul-smelling vapours rising from swamps and garbage heaps, remains dominant among both physicians and lay people. This explains why some public health efforts focus on eliminating bad smells rather than improving water quality, an approach that occasionally helps when the source of the smell is also the source of contamination, but which often misses the actual problem entirely. Historians still argue about when and how Americans began to understand the connection between water quality and disease. The full germ theory of disease lies decades in the future, but practical observations have led some communities to protect their water sources with care that suggests at least partial understanding. Towns that prohibit dumping waste upstream from drinking water intakes tend to experience fewer epidemics than those that do not. Families that dig their wells far from their outhouses tend to stay healthier than those who place them close together. Correlation may not prove causation, but it guides behaviour even without formal understanding. For now, you do what everyone does. Drink the water that is available, maintain the wells and pumps that provide it, and pray that this summer is not the summer when contamination strikes. It is not much of a strategy, but it is the only one you have. The pump handle squeaks as you work it again, filling a bucket to carry back to the porch. Your mother will want water for cooking, your father will need it in the barn, and you should drink more yourself before the afternoon heat reaches its peak. Water is life in a very literal sense, the foundation of survival that must be secured before anything else can happen. You carry the bucket carefully, trying not to slosh, and notice how quickly the water warms to ambient temperature. By the time you reach the porch, the liquid that emerged cold from the pump has already begun its transformation into something merely cool, and by evening it will be lukewarm at best. This is why multiple trips to the pump are necessary, why the bucket must be refilled again and again, why water acquisition is not a single morning task, but an ongoing daily rhythm. Your mother takes the bucket with a nod of thanks and pours some into a clay pitcher that will sit on the kitchen table, accessible to anyone who needs a drink. Clay is porous, allowing slight evaporation that keeps the contents marginally cooler than the surrounding air. It is another small technological innovation, another trick for making summer marginally more bearable. You sit back down on the porch, slightly cooler now from the water you drank, and watch the summer shimmer in the heat-distorted air beyond the shade. Water has bought you time, but only time. The heat remains, patient and relentless, waiting to extract its toll from anyone who ventures beyond shelter. The first mosquito arrives with the subtlety of a tiny whining assassin. You hear it before you feel it. That high-pitched drone that seems specifically engineered to drive humans to madness. Your hand swats instinctively, hitting only air, and the mosquito continues its approach, eventually landing on your forearm with a delicacy that belies its murderous intent. You feel the bite before you can respond. That familiar pinprick followed by the maddening itch that will persist for days. Another swat, this one connecting with something soft and satisfying, and you examine your palm to find a smear of your own blood mixed with the crushed remains of the insect. Victory of a sort, but you know it is temporary. Where there is one mosquito, there are thousands, and the war you have just won is merely a skirmish in a campaign you cannot possibly win. Summer insects in 1840s. America are not merely annoying. They're a plague of biblical proportions, an inescapable presence that affects every aspect of daily life, and causes genuine suffering and death on a scale that modern pest control has mercifully reduced. You're about to experience this reality in intimate, itching detail. Start with mosquitoes, since one has already drawn first blood. The species that torment you are the same ones that torment Americans today. Aedes, Culex, Anopheles. But their populations are vastly larger in an era before drainage projects, pesticides, and window screens. Standing water breeds mosquitoes, and 1840s, America is full of standing water. Rain barrels, horse troughs, puddles in rutted roads, swamps that no one has bothered to drain, rivers that overflow their banks each spring and leave stagnant pools behind. Your farm alone provides dozens of mosquito breeding sites. The pig wallow, which the pigs love because the mud keeps them cool, is essentially a mosquito nursery. The water trough for the horses must be refilled daily, but the residue at the bottom never fully dries. The ditch that runs along the edge of the property, designed to drain excess rainwater, collects enough moisture to support endless generations of larvae. Fighting mosquitoes in this era is an exercise in frustration and creativity. Your mother hangs bundles of dried herbs near doorways. Pennyroyal, tansy and mint are favourites, believing that their strong scent repels insects. Historians still argue whether these folk remedies have any genuine effectiveness, or whether they simply provide the psychological comfort of taking action against an invincible enemy. The evidence suggests modest effects at best, with most insects simply flying around the barriers to find exposed skin elsewhere. Smoke is more effective, and evening meals are often conducted near smoky fires for exactly this reason. The burning of certain substances, dried manure, specific woods, tobacco in regions where it is available, produces acrid smoke that mosquitoes find unpleasant, driving them temporarily away from the smoke's immediate vicinity. The downside, of course, is that humans also find the smoke unpleasant, trading itching bites for stinging eyes and coughing fits. At night, when mosquitoes are most active and escape is most necessary, bed nets offer the best protection. Your family owns 2 nets, gauzy canopies that drape over beds and create a barrier between sleeper and insect. The nets work well when properly deployed, tucked under the mattress, free of holes, covering every possible entry point. But nets are expensive, requiring significant fabric and careful construction, and most American families in this era do without, preferring to suffer the bites rather than spend money they do not have. Beyond mosquitoes, you face a menagerie of other insect tormentors. Flies are omnipresent, attracted by the animal waste that is inseparable from farm life. They land on food, crawl across sleeping faces, and spread diseases through mechanisms that scientists of this era are only beginning to understand. Fly paper exists, sticky strips coated with molasses or other attractants, and your kitchen ceiling is decorated with several strips, each one studded with the bodies of trapped insects like some grotesque form of wallpaper. Bedbugs infest mattresses and bedding, emerging at night to feed on human blood and leaving itching welts that can become infected if scratched too vigorously. Fighting bedbugs requires regular airing of bedding, exposure to direct sunlight that supposedly kills the insects, and periodic applications of various substances, kerosene, turpentine, mercury compounds, that are often more dangerous to humans than to bugs. Here is a quirky detail that might make you squirm. Lice are common enough that most people consider them a minor inconvenience rather than a source of shame. Head lice, body lice, pubic lice all thrive in an era of limited bathing and shared bedding. Delousing is a regular activity, especially for children, involving fine-toothed combs and patient searching through hair for the tiny parasites in their eggs. Finding lice on your child is annoying but expected. It signals nothing about your character or cleanliness, only that you live in a world where such creatures are endemic. Ticks present different dangers, attaching themselves to skin during walks through tall grass and transmitting diseases that can prove fatal. Your grandfather tells stories of people who developed strange fevers after tick bites, fevers that left them weakened for months or killed them outright. Modern medicine would recognize these as tick-borne illnesses: Lyme disease, Rocky Mountain spotted fever. But in the 1840s, they are mysterious afflictions with no known cause or cure. The cumulative effect of all these insects is a constant low-level misery that becomes the background radiation of summer existence. You're always itching somewhere, always swatting at something, always aware of the tiny creatures that share your environment and view you as a food source. Sleep is interrupted by bites. Work is hampered by the need to wave away flies. Meals are compromised by insects that land on food before you can eat it. And yet people adapt, as they always do. You learn to move through the insect-rich world with a certain resigned efficiency, accepting bites as inevitable, while minimizing their frequency through whatever means available. You develop calluses, metaphorically speaking, against the constant irritation, focusing your attention on tasks that matter while relegating insects to the category of unavoidable nuisance. The mosquito that bit you earlier has friends, and they are arriving now, drawn by the carbon dioxide of your breath and the warmth of your blood-filled body. You retreat from the porch toward the kitchen, where the smoke from your mother's cooking provides temporary protection. The afternoon stretches ahead, long and hot and buzzing with the sound of wings. Night arrives not as relief, but as transformation. The heat does not disappear when the sun sets. It lingers, trapped in the earth and the wooden walls and the very air itself, releasing slowly over hours that feel like days. But the quality of the heat changes, becoming less aggressive, more passive, a weight that presses down rather than a force that attacks. You stand in your bedroom doorway, contemplating the mattress that awaits you. The straw stuffing has absorbed the day's heat and is now radiating it back, transforming the bed into something resembling a heated torture device. You could lie on it, certainly. You could close your eyes and will yourself toward unconsciousness. But the prospect fills you with a weariness that goes beyond physical fatigue. Sleep in summer is not rest. Sleep in summer is a battle, fought nightly, won only occasionally, leaving combatants exhausted regardless of outcome. Your first challenge is temperature. The human body sleeps best at temperatures between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, a range that allows the natural overnight drop in core temperature to proceed without interference. Your bedroom tonight is easily 80 degrees, possibly higher, and will not drop below 75 until well after midnight. Your body wants to cool down, needs to cool down, but the environment refuses to cooperate. You strip to your underthings, a liberty that daylight hours do not permit, and lie atop the sheets rather than beneath them. The mattress radiates heat from below, while the air presses heat from above, creating a thermal sandwich with you as the uncomfortable filling. Sweat forms immediately, soaking into the straw beneath you, adding humidity to the already moisture-laden air. Across the room, your brother has adopted a different strategy. He lies on the bare wooden floor, having pushed his mattress aside entirely. Wood holds less heat than straw, and the floor offers a slightly cooler surface, though at the cost of comfort. He will wake with aches in his back and shoulders, but he may also wake having actually slept, which is a trade-off worth considering. Some families have adopted more radical solutions. Sleeping porches, screened enclosures on the upper floors of houses, allow families to sleep outdoors while remaining protected from insects and weather. These porches become summer bedrooms furnished with cots or mattresses, occupied from June through September. They're common enough in some regions that architects design homes with sleeping porches included, recognizing that interior bedrooms are essentially unusable during the warmest months. Your house lacks a sleeping porch, but your family has discussed the possibility of sleeping outside during the worst heat waves. The yard offers more air circulation than any indoor room, and the psychological benefit of sky above rather than ceiling can make the same temperature feel more bearable. The risks, dew, insects, the unlikely but not impossible threat of animal intrusion, have so far outweighed the benefits in your mother's calculation, but nights like this one might change her mind. Historians still argue about the long-term health effects of chronic sleep deprivation in the 1800s. Modern science has established clear links between poor sleep and a host of negative outcomes: weakened immune function, impaired cognitive performance, increased risk of accidents and injuries. If these findings apply to historical populations, and there is no reason to think they would not, then summer months represented a period of significantly degraded human functioning across the American population. Farmers made more mistakes during summer, potentially explaining some of the accidents that occurred during harvest. Workers in factories and mills operated with diminished attention, contributing to injury rates that were already alarmingly high. Students learned less effectively, though this may have contributed to the tradition of summer vacation that would eventually become standard in American schools. The entire society operated at reduced capacity for 3 or 4 months each year, accepting this diminishment as a natural and unavoidable consequence of seasonal heat. Here is a quirky detail about summer sleep that might surprise you. Wealthy families sometimes employed servants whose sole job was to fan sleeping family members through the night. These fan pullers worked in shifts, standing or sitting beside beds and moving large fans in rhythmic motions that created airflow over sleepers. The fans themselves might be simple handheld implements or elaborate ceiling-mounted devices connected by ropes and pulleys. Either way, they represented a labour-intensive solution to a problem that would eventually be solved by technology. The punka, an Indian invention that British colonisers brought back to their home country and eventually to America, was a large fabric fan suspended from the ceiling and operated by a rope that extended outside the room. A servant pulling the rope from a hallway or an adjacent room could create continuous airflow without entering the sleeping space and disturbing its occupants. Punkas appeared in wealthy southern homes, hotels and public buildings, providing relief that seemed almost magical to those who experienced it for the first time. You have no servant, no punka, no sleeping porch. You have only this bed, this room, this night that seems to stretch toward infinity. You lie still, trying to minimize the heat your body generates through movement and wait for sleep to claim you despite the conditions. It does, eventually. Sleep always does. When the body reaches a certain threshold of exhaustion, you slip from consciousness into something that is not quite rest. A shallow doze punctuated by moments of waking, when the heat becomes temporarily unbearable, or when an insect whines too close to your ear. You dream of winter, of snow falling silent and cold, of standing in a frozen field and feeling your fingers grow numb. The dream is pleasant in the way that only impossible dreams can be, a respite from reality that your sleeping mind has conjured as a gift. You want to stay in the dream, to linger in the cold that feels so foreign and so wonderful. But waking intrudes, and the heat returns, and you open your eyes to darkness that is barely cooler than the air you just escaped. Your brother snores on his wooden floor, his breathing regular and peaceful, in a way that suggests genuine sleep. You envy him briefly, then close your eyes again, chasing the dream of winter back into whatever corner of your mind produced it. The night passes slowly, measured in hours that feel like weeks, in cycles of dozing and waking that leave you more tired than you were at bedtime. But it passes, as all nights do, and when dawn finally begins to lighten the eastern sky, you rise from the bed that was never truly comfortable and prepare to face another summer day. The children wake before you do, their voices carrying from somewhere downstairs where they have already begun the negotiations and minor conflicts that define childhood. Your youngest sister wants something. You cannot quite make out what through the fog of incomplete sleep, and your cousin, visiting from a neighbouring farm, is telling her she cannot have it. This is the soundtrack of summer mornings when the household includes children, a mixture of energy and complaint that seems impossible given the heat. You descend the stairs to find the children already dressed, already halfway through the morning chores that have been assigned to them. Your sister is gathering eggs, a task she performs with careful seriousness despite being only 7 years old. Your cousin, 2 years older, is hauling water from the pump, sloshing half of it onto the ground with each trip, but getting enough into the kitchen to satisfy your mother's requirements. Summer for children in 1840s. America is not the vacation that modern minds might imagine. There is no concept of summer break in the way the 21st century understands it. School schedules are not yet standardized, and in rural areas like this one, formal education often takes a backseat to agricultural necessity regardless of season. Children work just as adults work, because their labour is genuinely needed, and because idleness is considered both sinful and dangerous. Your sister's egg gathering is not a game or a lesson. It is real work that produces real value. Eggs that the family will eat, sell, or trade for other necessities. Your cousin's water hauling keeps the household functioning through tasks that are too simple for adults to waste time on, but too heavy for the youngest children to manage. Between them, these two youngsters contribute measurably to family survival, and they know it, taking pride in work that their bodies are barely strong enough to perform. This is not to say that childhood in this era is joyless. Far from it. Children find moments of play amid the work, turning chores into games, racing each other to finish first, sneaking off to the creek for unauthorized swimming when adult supervision lapses. The human capacity for fun is not easily suppressed, and children have been extracting pleasure from difficult circumstances since the beginning of history. But the balance is different than what modern children experience. Play is the exception, work is the rule. Free time must be stolen rather than scheduled, and the consequences of shirking responsibilities are immediate and tangible, animals unfed, eggs ungated, water unhauled, rather than the abstract disappointments of grades or allowances. Summer presents particular challenges for children, challenges that adults often overlook in their focus on their own discomfort. Children's bodies are less efficient at regulating temperature than adult bodies, making them more vulnerable to heat-related illness. Children have less experience recognizing the warning signs of dehydration and heat stroke, which means they may continue playing or working long past the point when an adult would seek shade and water. Children are assigned outdoor tasks, tending animals, running errands, helping in fields, that expose them to direct sunlight for hours at a time. The mortality rates tell a grim story. Children under 5 years old died at horrifying rates in 1800s America, and summer was the deadliest season. Summer complaint, a catch-all term for the diarrheal diseases that peaked in warm weather, killed tens of thousands of infants and toddlers each year. Older children died from heat stroke, from accidents related to farm work, from diseases transmitted by the insects that flourished in summer months. Your mother watches the children with an attention that might seem excessive if you did not understand its source. She has already lost one child, a son who lived only 3 days, born in the summer of 1838, and carried off by a fever that the doctor could not explain. The loss marked her in ways that are not visible but are always present, a wariness about children's health that shapes every decision she makes. She insists on rest during the hottest hours, on water breaks throughout the day, on shade whenever shade is available. Other mothers in the community consider her overprotective, but she has buried a child, and they have not, and she will not bury another if any action of hers can prevent it. Here is a quirky detail that illuminates the precariousness of childhood in this era. Many families do not name their children until they have survived their first summer. The logic is both practical and emotional. If an infant dies before receiving a name, the loss is somehow easier to bear, the grief less piercing. This practice is declining by the 1840s, as infant mortality rates slowly improve and cultural attitudes shift, but it persists in some communities, a testament to how recently summer was synonymous with childhood death. Your sister finishes her egg gathering and presents the basket to your mother for inspection. 7 eggs, 1 fewer than yesterday, which prompts a brief discussion about whether one of the hens might be going broody, ceasing to lay because some instinct has convinced her to start sitting on eggs instead. Your mother will investigate later, when the kitchen work is done, but for now she accepts the basket and sends your sister to help your cousin with the water. You watch the children work, marvelling at their energy despite the heat that has already begun to build. They move through the morning with a resilience that you once possessed but have somehow lost, adapting to conditions that should be intolerable with a flexibility that seems almost supernatural. Children are amazing that way, capable of finding joy and purpose in circumstances that would break adults, rising to challenges that they do not yet understand are supposed to be impossible. Later today, when the heat reaches its peak, the children will be confined to the house or the shade of the porch, their energy redirected toward quieter activities. Your mother will read to them from the Bible or from one of the few storybooks the family owns. Your cousin might practice letters on a slate, continuing the informal education that supplements his occasional attendance at the district school. Your sister might play with her cornhusk doll, creating elaborate domestic dramas that mirror the adult world she observes. But for now, in the relative cool of morning, they work, their small hands contributing to a family economy that depends on every member doing their part. This is childhood in 1840s America, not innocent, not carefree, but not without its own forms of meaning and satisfaction. The wheat is ready. Your father announces this at breakfast with the gravity of a general declaring war, because in a very real sense, that is exactly what he is doing. The next 2 weeks will be a battle against time, weather, and the limits of human endurance, fought in the most brutal heat of the summer, with the family's economic survival hanging in the balance. Harvest in 1840s. America is not a matter of driving a combine through fields while sitting in an air-conditioned cab. It is manual labour of the most demanding kind, performed with hand tools that have changed little in centuries, under conditions that would trigger workplace safety violations in any modern context. You are about to experience this labour firsthand, and the experience will mark you in ways that will not fade even when your muscles finally stop aching. The day begins before dawn, while the air still holds some memory of nighttime coolness. Your father leads the way to the wheat field, carrying the scythe that he sharpened yesterday, a curved blade attached to a long wooden handle, designed to be swung in wide arcs that cut through grain stalks at their base. You carry a rake for gathering the fallen wheat into bundles, and your brother brings twine for tying those bundles into sheaves that can be transported to the barn. The field stretches before you, golden and waving, beautiful in a way that is difficult to appreciate when you know what the next several hours will bring. Wheat at this stage is ready for harvest. The heads heavy with ripe grain, the stalks dry enough to cut cleanly, the whole plant balanced at that perfect moment between maturity and overripeness. Wait too long, and the grain will begin to shatter, falling to the ground and becoming food for birds rather than flour for bread. Act too soon, and the grain will be immature, yielding less flour of lower quality. Your father has been watching this field for weeks, assessing its readiness with an expertise born from decades of farming. He knows exactly when to begin, and that time is now. The first swing of the scythe produces a satisfying sound, a whisper of metal through stems, followed by the soft collapse of cut wheat onto the ground. Your father moves forward with a rhythm that seems almost mechanical, his body remembering motions that it has performed thousands of times before. Swing, step, swing, step. The pattern repeats endlessly, each cycle clearing a swath of grain about 3 feet wide. You follow behind, raking the fallen wheat into piles, gathering enough for a single sheaf before moving on to the next pile. Your brother follows you, binding the sheaves with twine, creating neat bundles that will stand in the field until they can be collected and transported. This is the harvest chain, 3 people working in sequence, each dependent on the others, each contributing to a process that cannot be done alone. The heat arrives gradually, then all at once. As the sun climbs higher, the field transforms from merely warm to genuinely dangerous. There is no shade here, no escape from direct sunlight that beats down with an intensity that feels personal. The wheat itself reflects heat upward, creating a kind of thermal envelope that surrounds you from all directions. Sweat pours from your body, soaking through your clothes, dripping into your eyes, pooling in your boots. Here is something that may surprise you. Scythe work is among the most physically demanding activities that humans have ever performed on a regular basis. Studies of modern traditional farmers who still use scythes have measured energy expenditures comparable to professional athletes during competition. Your heart rate during active cutting can exceed 150 beats per minute, sustained for hours at a time. The calories burned are enormous, perhaps 4,000 or 5,000 in a single harvest day, requiring food intake that approaches what Olympic swimmers consume. And you are doing this in heat that would shut down modern athletic events, without access to sports drinks or electrolyte supplements, without knowledge of hydration science that would help you optimize your fluid intake. You drink water when you remember to, when the thirst becomes unbearable, but you cannot drink enough to replace what you are losing. By midday, you will be moderately dehydrated despite your best efforts, and the effects will show in your concentration, your coordination, your ability to continue working. Your father pauses to sharpen his scythe, running a whetstone along the blade with practiced strokes. This is necessary every 20 minutes or so, as the metal dulls against the tough wheat stems. While he sharpens, you and your brother catch up on the gathering and binding, reducing the backlog that accumulates when the cutting outpaces the processing. Historians still argue about the productivity of pre-industrial agriculture, but the numbers for wheat harvest are well documented. A skilled worker with a scythe can cut about an acre of wheat per day, assuming favourable conditions and continuous effort. Your family's wheat field is approximately 15 acres, which means the harvest will take at least 2 weeks, assuming no days lost to rain, or heat stroke, or equipment failure. During those 2 weeks, you will work from first light until exhaustion forces you to stop, pausing only for meals and the brief rest periods that prevent complete collapse. You will lose weight despite eating more than usual, your body burning through its reserves faster than they can be replenished. You will develop blisters that become calluses, sore muscles that become numbness, a fatigue so deep that even your dreams will be tired. This is harvest in the 1840s. This is the annual ordeal that transforms grain into food, that sustains families through winter, that defines the rhythm of agricultural life across America. And you are living it, one swing of the scythe at a time, one bundle of wheat at a time, one endless minute at a time. The sun reaches its zenith, and your father calls for the midday break. You stumble toward the farmhouse, your legs barely cooperating, your vision slightly blurred from dehydration and heat. Behind you, the wheat field lies partly shorn, a visible record of the morning's labour. Ahead of you lies rest, food, and the slow accumulation of strength needed to return and do it all again. The letter arrives from your cousin in Philadelphia, and its descriptions of city summer make your rural heat seem almost pleasant by comparison. She writes of air so thick with smoke and stench that breathing feels like labour, of streets where horse manure ferments in the sun until the smell alone can induce vomiting, of tenement buildings where dozens of families share spaces designed for one, their combined body heat transforming living quarters into something approaching hell. You read the letter aloud to your family, gathered on the porch in the late afternoon shade, and everyone listens with the mixture of horror and fascination that city stories always provoke. Philadelphia is the largest city most of you have ever seen, a metropolis of over 250,000 people crowded into a space that nature never intended to support such density. Your cousin moved there 3 years ago, following her husband who found work in a textile mill, and her letters have provided a window into a world that seems almost incomprehensible from your rural vantage point. Summer in 1840s, American cities is a crisis repeated annually, a public health catastrophe that kills thousands and sickens tens of thousands more. The mechanisms of urban heat differ from rural heat in ways that modern meteorologists would call the urban heat island effect. The tendency of cities to retain more heat than surrounding countryside, due to the thermal properties of buildings, streets, and the sheer concentration of heat-generating activities. Start with the buildings. Urban structures in this era are typically constructed of brick or stone, materials that absorb sunlight during the day and release it slowly through the night. While rural areas cool significantly after sunset, cities remain warm, their buildings acting like thermal batteries that maintain elevated temperatures around the clock. A night that would bring relief in the countryside brings only slightly diminished misery in the city. The streets compound the problem. Cobblestone and packed dirt absorb heat just like buildings, creating a landscape where nearly every surface is radiating warmth. There is little vegetation to provide shade or cooling through transpiration. Trees that might have grown here were cut down decades ago to make room for construction, and no one has thought to replace them. The result is an environment where escaping direct sunlight provides minimal relief because the heated surfaces continue to cook you even in shade. Now add the people, hundreds of thousands of them, each generating body heat, each breathing out warm air and metabolic waste. Add the horses, thousands of them, providing transportation and hauling and all the services that urban life requires. Add the factories, belching smoke and steam from processes that generate enormous amounts of heat as a byproduct. Add the kitchens, the blacksmith shops, the bakeries, all the businesses that require fire and that operate regardless of ambient temperature. Your cousin's description of her tenement building would make you weep if you were not already hardened by your own summer suffering. She shares a 2-room apartment with her husband and 3 children, but those rooms are not truly hers. They are subdivided spaces in a building that houses over 40 families. Walls are thin, ceilings are low, windows are small and face brick walls rather than open air. The combined heat of all those families, in a space designed without ventilation, creates temperatures that must be experienced to be believed. She writes of children who cannot sleep, who cry through the night from heat and thirst, who develop rashes that cover their entire bodies. She writes of neighbours who die, an elderly woman 2 doors down, a baby on the floor above, their bodies weakened by heat until some final illness carries them off. She writes of the smell, the ever-present stench of human waste and rotting garbage and bodies that cannot be kept clean, in conditions that make bathing nearly impossible. Historians still argue about mortality statistics in 1840s American cities, but the evidence is clear that urban residents died at significantly higher rates than their rural counterparts. The causes were multiple. Disease spread more easily in crowded conditions, sanitation was virtually non-existent, air quality approached toxic levels, but summer heat was a major contributing factor. Bodies that might have fought off infection in cooler weather succumbed when heat weakened their defences. Children and elderly who might have survived mild fevers died when those fevers combined with environmental heat to push body temperatures beyond recovery. Here is a quirky detail that illuminates the desperation of urban summer. Fire escapes, which began appearing on American buildings in the mid-19th century as a safety requirement, quickly became outdoor bedrooms for tenement residents. Families would drag mattresses onto the narrow metal platforms, sleeping in the open air where at least some breeze might reach them. The practice was technically illegal in many cities, blocked doorways and created safety hazards, but enforcement was impossible when the alternative was sleeping in rooms that felt like ovens. Your cousin cannot use her fire escape for sleeping. Her building lacks one, as do many older structures that were built before the requirement was established. Her children sleep on the floor, which is slightly cooler than beds, while she and her husband take turns sitting by the window, hoping to catch any stray breeze that might wander down the narrow alley their apartment faces. She does not ask your family for help, though you know she's thinking about it. A summer on the farm would be paradise compared to what she's experiencing, and there is room here, barely, for her family to stay. But leaving Philadelphia means leaving her husband's job, and his job is what keeps them fed, and the calculations of survival do not balance in favour of temporary relief from heat. You fold the letter and place it in your pocket, thinking about your cousin and her children, sweating in a building that was never designed for human comfort. Your own discomfort seems smaller now, contextualised by the suffering of those whose circumstances are worse. You have shade, well water, air that moves occasionally, space to escape to. Your cousin has none of these things, only the grim determination to survive until September brings relief. This is what summer means in 1840s America, a season that tests everyone, but that tests city dwellers with particular cruelty. You will remember your cousin's letter when the heat becomes unbearable, will draw strange comfort from the knowledge that others are suffering more. It is not a generous impulse, this comparative relief, but it is human, and in summer, humanity must take what comfort it can find. The first case appears in the neighbouring county, a whispered rumour that spreads faster than the disease itself. Cholera, someone says, and the word carries a weight that makes everyone fall silent. Cholera, that invisible killer that strikes without warning and carries off the healthy alongside the weak. Cholera, the summer terror that haunts every American community from June through September. You do not see the disease yourself, not yet, but you hear the stories. A farmer who complained of stomach cramps at breakfast and was dead by dinner. A family of 5 reduced to 3 in a single week. A town that closed its borders, posted armed guards at every road, turning away travellers who might carry contamination. These stories may be exaggerated, fear breeds exaggeration, but they are not entirely invented. Cholera is real, and it is close, and everyone is afraid. Summer diseases in 1840s, America form a litany of horrors that modern medicine has largely banished from collective memory. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, yellow fever, each strikes preferentially in warm weather, exploiting the conditions that summer creates, transforming the season of abundance into a season of death. Cholera travels through contaminated water, though no one in your era fully understands this mechanism. The bacteria that cause it, Vibrio cholerae, thrive in warm temperatures, multiplying in water supplies that become contaminated by human waste. A single carrier can contaminate a well, a stream, a city's entire water system, spreading infection to hundreds or thousands of people before anyone recognizes what is happening. The symptoms are terrifying and unmistakable. Severe diarrhea that drains the body of fluids faster than they can be replaced. Vomiting that prevents any attempt at rehydration. Muscle cramps, sunken eyes, blue-tinged skin as circulation fails. Death can come within hours of the first symptoms, the body essentially emptying itself of everything needed to sustain life. There is no treatment that works reliably. Doctors of this era try everything: bleeding, purging, mercury compounds, opium for pain. But nothing addresses the fundamental problem of fluid loss. Rehydration therapy, the simple practice of replacing lost fluids with clean water and salts, will eventually prove effective, but that knowledge lies decades in the future. For now, cholera patients either recover through luck and strong constitutions or they die. Your family takes precautions, the same precautions every family takes when cholera threatens. You avoid travel, reducing contact with potentially contaminated people and places. You examine your water with new suspicion, though looking at water tells you nothing about what might be living in it. You pray, asking God to spare your household from the plague that is surely a sign of divine displeasure. Historians still argue about what Americans of this era believed caused cholera. The miasma theory suggested bad air, and many people burned sulfur and other substances to purify the atmosphere around their homes. Others blamed moral failings, noting that cholera seemed to strike hardest in poor neighbourhoods where vice supposedly flourished. A few advanced thinkers suspected water contamination, but they could not explain exactly how water became dangerous or prove their theories scientifically. Here is a quirky detail that illustrates the confusion. Some communities responded to cholera outbreaks by draining their wells and scrubbing them clean, a practice that occasionally helped by removing contamination from the water supply. Other communities responded by burning animal carcasses and garbage, hoping to eliminate the bad air they believed caused disease. Still others did nothing at all, accepting cholera as God's will and declining to intervene in what seemed like divine judgment. Beyond cholera, your summer faces other disease threats. Summer complaint, that vague term for infant diarrhea, kills thousands of children each year. Its cause is poorly understood, its treatment essentially non-existent. Typhoid fever, transmitted through contaminated food and water, produces lingering illness that can last weeks or months. Yellow fever, carried by mosquitoes though no one knows it yet, strikes coastal cities with terrifying regularity, emptying entire neighbourhoods as residents flee or die. The connection between summer heat and disease seems obvious to everyone, even if the mechanisms remain mysterious. People notice that illness spikes when temperatures rise, that cities are more dangerous than countryside, that certain neighbourhoods consistently experience more disease than others. They develop theories to explain these patterns, some partially correct, some completely wrong, and adjust their behaviour accordingly. Your mother increases her vigilance, monitoring everyone for the slightest sign of illness. She prepares remedies that she has been taught are effective: willow bark tea for fever, blackberry root for diarrhea, though she knows these treatments are uncertain at best. She keeps the children close, limiting their exposure to others who might carry disease. She prays with a fervour that deepens as the summer progresses and the death toll in neighbouring counties rises. You feel it too, the fear that settles over summer like a second layer of heat. Every stomach gurgle provokes anxiety. Every headache might be the beginning of the end. You find yourself examining your own body with suspicious attention, searching for symptoms that would mark the start of your decline. This is summer in 1840s America, not just hot but deadly, not just uncomfortable but genuinely dangerous. The heat is the background against which other horrors play out, a constant stress that weakens bodies and enables diseases that might otherwise be fought off. You survive the heat only to face the diseases that the heat makes possible. September seems impossibly far away, a promised land of cooler temperatures and diminished danger that you may or may not live to see. For now, you endure one day at a time, watching for signs of illness, hoping that your family will be among those spared. The doctor arrives in his buggy, summoned not for your family, thank God, not for your family, but for the Hendersons, whose farm lies a mile to the east. You see him pass on the road, his black bag on the seat beside him, his expression grave in the way that doctors' expressions always seem grave in summer. He does not stop to speak, but you know what his visit means. Someone is sick, perhaps very sick, and the Henderson household is now a place to be avoided. Medicine in 1840s, America operates under principles that future generations will recognise as almost entirely wrong. The dominant theory of disease, the humoral theory, inherited from ancient Greece and refined over centuries, holds that illness results from imbalances in the body's four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Treatment, according to this theory, consists of restoring balance through interventions that seem reasonable within the theory's logic, but which often harm patients more than they help. Bleeding is the most common intervention, the removal of blood from the body to reduce what doctors believe is an excess that causes fever and inflammation. Heat-related illness seems particularly suited to bleeding, since the flushed skin and elevated pulse of heat stroke suggests too much blood producing too much warmth. Doctors open veins in arms, apply leeches to skin, even cut open the temporal artery near the forehead in severe cases. The blood that flows out carries away the excess heat, or so the theory goes, while the weakened patient is actually being drained of vital fluid that their body desperately needs. Now, here is what actually happens when you bleed someone suffering from heat stroke. You remove blood that is already struggling to circulate effectively, reducing the body's ability to distribute heat and maintain blood pressure. The patient, already dehydrated, loses more fluid. Their heart, already stressed by heat, must work harder with less blood volume. What looks like calming, the reduced pulse, the paler skin, the quieter demeanour, is actually the onset of shock, the body failing faster because of the treatment rather than despite it. Purging is another common intervention, the administration of substances that induce vomiting or diarrhea in an attempt to expel disease from the body. Calomel, a mercury compound, is the most popular purgative given to patients suffering from nearly any ailment in doses that would horrify modern toxicologists. The vomiting and diarrhea that follow do indeed empty the body, but they also accelerate the dehydration that is already killing the patient. Your family has experienced medical treatment of this kind before, and the experiences have left everyone skeptical. Your grandmother, when she fell ill 2 summers ago, was bled repeatedly by the doctor until she could barely sit up, then dosed with calomel that left her retching for days. She survived, but your mother believes she survived despite the treatment rather than because of it. Since then, the family has been reluctant to summon doctors, preferring home remedies that at least do no active harm. Folk medicine in this era is a complicated mixture of genuine wisdom and complete nonsense. Some remedies work, even if the reasons they work are misunderstood. Willow bark tea, which your mother uses for fever, contains salicin, a compound related to aspirin that actually does reduce body temperature. Vinegar applied to the skin, another folk remedy, can provide cooling through evaporation, offering real if modest relief from heat. Other remedies are useless at best, harmful at worst. Mercury administered in various forms is toxic in any amount, causing damage to kidneys, liver, and nervous system that can persist long after the original illness has passed. Bloodletting removes fluid that dehydrated bodies desperately need. Opium, given for pain and discomfort, depresses respiration and can push weakened patients into fatal decline. Historians still argue about the net effect of 1840s medicine on health outcomes. Some evidence suggests that patients who avoided doctors entirely had better survival rates than those who received standard treatment, though this evidence is contested and the situations are not truly comparable. What seems clear is that medical knowledge of this era, while earnest in its intentions, often did more harm than good, particularly for conditions like heat-related illness that required fluid replacement rather than fluid removal. Your mother's approach to summer health reflects this complicated reality. She uses remedies that seem helpful: cooling baths, encouraging fluids, rest in shaded areas, while avoiding interventions that seem dangerous. She watches for symptoms that might indicate serious illness, but she does not rush to summon the doctor at every sign of discomfort. This is not neglect. It is a reasoned response to the genuine uncertainty about whether medical treatment helps or harms. The Hendersons situation weighs on everyone's mind throughout the day. You see the doctor's buggy return in the late afternoon, moving slowly, the doctor's posture suggesting fatigue or defeat. You do not know what he found at the Henderson farm, what illness he treated, what outcome he achieved. But the not knowing is part of summer's terror, the sense that danger lurks everywhere, that the next household struck could be your own, that all your precautions might prove futile in the end. That night, you drink extra water before bed, trying to keep yourself hydrated against the heat that continues to grip the region. You think about humours and blood and all the medical theories that are supposed to explain why bodies fail in summer. You do not understand these theories fully, but you suspect that understanding them would not help anyway. Summer illness strikes whom it will, and your best defence is luck, prayer, and the stubborn determination to outlast the season. The smell hits you before you even enter the smokehouse, a thick, meaty odour that speaks of preservation and desperation in equal measure. Your mother has sent you to retrieve a ham that has been hanging since last autumn, curing in the smoky darkness, waiting for the moment when it will be needed. That moment is now, apparently, because the fresh meat your family had planned to eat this week has spoiled in the heat, becoming dangerous faster than anyone anticipated. Food spoilage in summer is not an occasional annoyance in 1840s America. It is a constant threat, a daily battle that determines whether families eat well or go hungry, whether meals provide nourishment or cause illness. The heat that makes everything else miserable also makes food preservation into a matter of survival, transforming kitchens into laboratories of desperation, where ancient techniques struggle against modern temperatures. The ham in the smokehouse represents one solution to this problem: meat that has been preserved through smoking and salting until it can survive months at ambient temperature. The process began last November when your father slaughtered a hog and your mother began the long work of preservation. The ham was rubbed with salt, packed in more salt, and left to cure for weeks while the salt drew moisture from the flesh. Then it was hung in the smokehouse, exposed to the steady smoke of hickory fires that deposited antimicrobial compounds and created the distinctive flavour that you have grown up associating with home. Properly cured ham can last a year or more, providing protein during months when fresh meat is unavailable or unsafe, But properly cured is the key phrase, and the process leaves significant room for error. Too little salt, and the meat will spoil from within. Too much smoke, and it becomes inedible from bitterness. Insects can penetrate the surface, laying eggs that hatch into maggots that consume the flesh. Humidity can cause mold to grow, sometimes harmless surface mold that can be scraped away, sometimes dangerous internal rot that is not discovered until the ham is cut open. You retrieve the ham, examining it carefully for any signs of spoilage. The surface is dark and slightly sticky, covered with the accumulated residue of smoke and time. You press it with your thumb, feeling for the firmness that indicates proper curing. It seems acceptable, but you will not know for certain until your mother slices into it and examines the interior. The root cellar, which you pass on your way back to the kitchen, represents another preservation strategy. Dug deep into the earth, insulated by soil and stone, it maintains temperatures that hover around 55 degrees year-round, cool enough to significantly extend the life of perishable foods. Vegetables from the garden are stored here: carrots, turnips, potatoes, cabbage, kept alive in darkness and coolness rather than preserved through processing. Dairy products occupy a precarious middle ground. Milk from this morning's milking is already beginning to sour, its sugars converted to lactic acid by bacteria that multiply rapidly in summer warmth. Your mother will use this milk to make butter or cheese, transforming a perishable liquid into products that last somewhat longer. The buttermilk left over from butter making will be drunk today, while it is still drinkable, or used in baking before it becomes too sour. Here is a quirky detail that might surprise you. Americans in this era intentionally sour many foods that modern people would consider spoiled. Sour cream, sour milk, sourdough bread. These are not failed preservation attempts but deliberate products, created when controlled fermentation produces flavours and textures that people actually prefer. The line between preserved, fermented, and spoiled is blurry, determined as much by cultural expectation as by microbiology. Pickling offers another avenue of preservation, and your mother has been pickling almost constantly since the garden began producing. Cucumbers, of course, become the pickles that everyone recognises, but almost any vegetable can be preserved in vinegar and salt. Beans, peppers, beets, cabbage transformed into sauerkraut. The cellar shelves are lined with jars and crocks of pickled produce, a hedge against the day when fresh vegetables are no longer available. Drying works for some foods, particularly fruits and herbs. Apple slices hang from strings in the attic, slowly desiccating in the hot air that would ruin other foods. Berries are spread on trays in the sun, becoming the raisins and dried fruits that will flavour winter cooking. The heat that spoils fresh food can preserve food that has been prepared correctly, transforming moisture-rich produce into shelf-stable provisions. Historians still argue about the nutritional adequacy of 1840s American diets, particularly during summer when fresh foods spoiled quickly and preserved foods dominated the table. Scurvy was rare but not unknown, particularly among those who relied too heavily on salted meat and grain. The lack of refrigeration pushed people toward preservation methods that reduced vitamin content, leaving them with food that provided calories but not complete nutrition. You deliver the ham to your mother, who examines it with the careful eye of someone who has been fooled before. She pronounces it acceptable, then sets about slicing portions for tonight's dinner. The ham will appear in various forms over the coming days: fried for breakfast, boiled with vegetables for dinner, chopped into beans for additional flavour. It represents investment, forethought, the labour of last autumn transformed into nourishment that is desperately needed now. The fresh meat that's spoiled will be buried or burned, its loss absorbed into the family budget as one of summer's inevitable costs. No one is happy about the waste, but no one is surprised either. Summer takes what it will, and you can only prepare as best you can and accept what cannot be avoided. The pitcher sweats on the kitchen table, condensation rolling down its sides in slow, fat droplets that pool on the wood beneath. Inside is something your mother calls switchel, and she has prepared it specifically for harvest work. A drink that promises to restore what the heat takes away, to provide energy and hydration in a form more interesting than plain water. You pour yourself a cup and drink it cautiously, tasting the vinegar first, then the molasses, then the ginger that provides a subtle heat of its own. It is not delicious exactly, but it is not terrible either, and after working in the fields all morning, anything wet seems like a gift from heaven. You drink the entire cup, pour another, drink that too. The switchel settles in your stomach with a coolness that seems almost unnatural, the vinegar bite cutting through the heat-induced nausea that has been building since dawn. Switchel, also called haymaker's punch, or switzel or swizzle, is one of the great unsung beverages of American history. It predates the nation itself, brought by colonists from England and adapted to American conditions over generations. The basic recipe is simple: water, vinegar, molasses or maple syrup and ginger, mixed together and served cold or at least cool. The proportions vary by family, by region, by individual preference, but the concept remains consistent. Why does it work? Modern nutritionists would point to several factors. The vinegar provides acetic acid, which some research suggests may help regulate blood sugar and reduce fatigue. The molasses or syrup provides simple sugars, quickly absorbed and converted to energy. The ginger settles the stomach, reducing the nausea that often accompanies heavy labour in heat. And the water, of course, provides the hydration that underlies everything else. But the people of the 1840s do not know about blood sugar or electrolytes. They know only that switchel helps, that workers who drink it perform better and feel better than workers who drink only water, that the recipe passed down from grandmothers seems to contain wisdom that cannot be fully explained. This is folk knowledge at its best. Practical effectiveness without theoretical understanding, wisdom accumulated through generations of trial and error. Your family's switchel recipe includes a pinch of salt, which your mother adds despite skepticism from neighbours who omit it. She learned the salted version from her mother, who learned it from her mother, and the chain of transmission stretches back beyond memory. Modern understanding would vindicate her. Salt replaces the sodium lost through sweat, preventing the muscle cramps and confusion that result from electrolyte imbalance. But she does not need vindication. She needs only the evidence of experience, and experience has taught her that salted switchel works better than unsalted. Beyond switchel, Americans of this era consume a remarkable variety of summer beverages, each with its own supposed benefits and genuine pleasures. Shrubs are drinking vinegars made by macerating fruit in vinegar and sugar, producing sweet tart syrups that are diluted with water and served cold. The name comes from the Arabic sharbat, and the tradition arrived in America through colonial trade networks that connected the New World to ancient beverage customs. Small beer occupies an interesting middle ground between beverage and food. Brewed with less grain and fewer hops than regular beer, it produces an alcoholic content of only 1 or 2%, enough to kill potentially dangerous bacteria in the water used for brewing, but not enough to cause intoxication when consumed in quantity. Children drink small beer throughout the day, as do adults who need to remain alert for work. It provides calories, hydration, and a mild antimicrobial effect, all in a form that tastes pleasant and goes down easily. Here is a quirky detail that might surprise you. Many Americans of this era believe that drinking cold water during hot weather is dangerous. The theory holds that cold water shocks the system, disrupting the body's natural heat regulation and potentially causing illness or even death. Some people refuse to drink anything cold in summer, insisting on beverages at room temperature or even warmed. Others drink cold water but do so gradually, sipping rather than gulping, waiting between drinks to allow their bodies to adjust. Historians still argue about the origins and validity of this belief. Some evidence suggests that very cold water consumed very quickly during extreme heat can cause stomach cramps and nausea, which may have been interpreted as signs of more serious danger. Other evidence suggests the belief was simply wrong, a folk theory that persisted because it was never properly tested. Whatever the truth, the belief shaped summer drinking habits, causing many Americans to deny themselves the relief that cold water would have provided. Your mother offers you a cup of buttermilk, the liquid left over from this morning's butter making. It has been kept in the root cellar, where it remains slightly cool despite the ambient heat. The buttermilk is tangy and thick, coating your mouth with a richness that water cannot provide. You drink it gratefully, feeling the calories begin to restore the energy that the morning's work depleted. Lemonade exists in this era, but it is a luxury reserved for special occasions. The lemons themselves are expensive, imported from warmer climates, and sugar costs enough to make casual consumption impractical. When your family does have lemonade, it is a treat, savoured slowly, a rare indulgence that marks the occasion as important. You remember the taste from last 4th of July, when your father splurged on lemons from the general store, and your mother made a pitcher that the family drank over 3 days, stretching the precious liquid as far as it would go. For now, switchel is sufficient. You pour another cup, carry it back to the porch, and drink it slowly while watching the afternoon heat shimmer over the fields. The harvest waits, but it can wait a few more minutes while you restore yourself for the labour ahead. The bath water is tepid, which is to say it is as cold as your mother can make it given the summer temperatures, and the labour required to draw and transport enough water to fill the small wooden tub. You lower yourself into it, feeling the liquid envelope you, providing a relief so profound that you make an involuntary sound somewhere between a sigh and a groan. This is the closest thing to comfort that summer offers. This brief submersion in water that is cooler than your own body temperature. This moment of respite from the endless assault of heat. Bathing in 1840s, America is not the casual daily ritual that modern people know. It is an event, a production, a task requiring significant planning and effort. The water must be drawn from the well, dozens of trips with a bucket carried by hand to wherever the tub will be placed. The tub itself must be positioned, usually in the kitchen where the floor can tolerate splashing, or outside in a sheltered spot where privacy can be maintained. The water, once the tub is filled, serves multiple bathers. You are not the first person to use this water today, and you will not be the last. You're bathing because you have been working in the harvest fields, because your body is caked with sweat and dust and the various organic residues that farm work produces, because your mother has declared you too filthy to enter the house in your current condition. This is a special occasion bath, prompted by exceptional circumstances rather than regular routine. In winter, weeks might pass between full baths, the cold making bathing uncomfortable, and the reduced sweating making it less necessary. Here is something that may surprise you about 1840s hygiene. Many people believe that bathing too frequently is dangerous. The theory holds that water opens the pores of the skin, allowing disease to enter the body more easily. Frequent bathing, according to this view, weakens the constitution and makes people more susceptible to illness. Some physicians recommend bathing no more than once per month, and even advocates of more frequent bathing caution against doing it too often. This belief is not universal. Some reformers and health advocates argue passionately for regular bathing, but it is widespread enough to shape common practice. Your mother falls somewhere in the middle, insisting on cleanliness when circumstances demand it while declining to bathe the family on any fixed schedule. She believes that bathing should respond to need rather than calendar, and summer's heat creates more need than winter's cold. The soap you use is homemade, produced from rendered animal fat mixed with lye extracted from wood ash. It cleans effectively but harshly, leaving your skin feeling stripped and slightly raw. Commercial soap exists, manufactured in factories and sold in stores, but it costs money that your family prefers to spend on other things. Homemade soap is free, or nearly so, requiring only materials that farm life produces in abundance. You scrub the dirt from your skin, watching it cloud the bath water until the liquid that started clear becomes murky, with the evidence of your labour. The feeling of clean skin is remarkable, so different from the grimy crust that you have been wearing for days that you want to sit in the tub forever, to prolong this sensation of freshness as long as possible. Deodorant does not exist, at least not in any form that would be recognised by modern standards. People manage body odour through cleanliness when possible, through powders and perfumes when necessary, through simple tolerance when nothing else is available. The smell of human sweat is ubiquitous in this era, a background note that everyone perceives and no one mentions, because commenting on something that everyone experiences would be both pointless and impolite. Historians still argue about how offensive 1840s Americans found body odour compared to modern sensibilities. Some evidence suggests that the threshold for noticing and objecting to smell was simply higher. People were accustomed to odours that would strike modern noses as overwhelming, and they filtered them out the way you filter out the sound of cicadas. Other evidence suggests that people found the smells just as unpleasant as modern people would, but lacked the technology to address them effectively. Here is a quirky detail. Some people in this era believe that washing the hair is particularly dangerous, more so than washing the body. Hair washing supposedly allows water to penetrate the skull and affect the brain, causing headaches, confusion, and other problems. People go months or even years without washing their hair, managing oil and dirt through brushing and the application of various powders. When hair washing does occur, it is treated as a significant event, sometimes requiring rest afterward to recover from the supposed shock to the system. Your mother approaches with a towel, actually a worn sheet cut down for this purpose, and you rise from the tub feeling the air hit your wet skin with a coolness that will vanish within minutes as the water evaporates and the heat reasserts its dominance. You dry yourself quickly, knowing that others are waiting for their turn in the tub, that the water you used will serve at least 2 more family members before it is finally emptied. Clean clothes wait for you, or at least clothes that are cleaner than the ones you removed. The laundry cycle in this era does not match modern expectations. A shirt might be worn for several days before washing, trousers for a week or more. Undergarments change when they become intolerable rather than according to any fixed schedule. Your mother washes laundry once a week when time and weather permit, heating water over the fire and scrubbing each item by hand on a washboard whose ridges have worn smooth from years of use. You dress in the clean clothes, feeling the fabric settle against your freshly washed skin, and the sensation is almost luxurious. You know it will not last. Within an hour you will be sweating again. The clothes will begin to absorb your body's output, and the cycle will resume its endless revolution. But for this moment, you are clean, and cleanliness in summer is a gift not to be taken lightly. The swimming hole appears through the trees like a mirage, a dark circle of water surrounded by willows whose branches trail lazily across the surface. You have been walking for 20 minutes, leaving the farm behind, abandoning responsibility for this brief excursion into something resembling pleasure. Your brother walks beside you, and your cousin, still visiting, still suffering through the Pennsylvania heat, follows a few steps behind. None of you have told your parents where you're going, which is technically a lie by omission, but which feels necessary given that permission would probably be denied. Swimming in 1840s America occupies a complicated cultural space. It is not forbidden exactly, but it is not entirely approved either. Concerns about modesty, about safety, about wasting time that should be devoted to work. All of these make swimming something that happens unofficially, in stolen moments, in places where no one is watching. The swimming hole is common property in theory, part of a stream that runs across multiple farms before joining the larger creek, that eventually becomes a tributary of the Susquehanna River. In practice, it belongs to whoever uses it, which right now means a group of younger children from the Miller farm who scatter as you approach, their shrieks of excitement or fear echoing through the willows as they grab clothes and disappear into the underbrush. You're wearing what you will swim in, which is to say you're wearing nothing. The tradition here, for males at least, is to swim unclothed. Bathing costumes are unknown in rural Pennsylvania, and the time and effort required to undress and redress in wet clothes seems pointless when no one is watching. Your brother and cousin follow the same practice, and within moments you're all in the water, submerged up to your necks in coolness that feels almost impossible after weeks of unrelenting heat. The water is not truly cold, it is fed by the same summer-warmed streams and groundwater that affect everything else. But it is cooler than air, cooler than your own body, cool enough to provide relief that borders on euphoria. You float on your back looking up at the sky through gaps in the willow canopy, and for a few precious minutes summer becomes bearable. Swimming as recreation is relatively new to American culture. Earlier generations viewed water primarily as a practical resource, for drinking, for washing, for transportation, rather than as a medium for pleasure. The idea that someone might enter water voluntarily, simply for the enjoyment of being in it, struck many people as strange, even dangerous. Drowning was common enough that parents warned children away from water rather than encouraging them to learn to swim. But cultural attitudes are shifting. The health reform movements that began earlier in the century have started to advocate for swimming as beneficial exercise, promoting the development of strength and coordination while providing the health benefits of cold water exposure. Seaside resorts have emerged along the Atlantic coast, catering to wealthy families who travel to the shore specifically to experience the ocean. Swimming is becoming, slowly, an acceptable recreational activity rather than a suspicious waste of time. Here is a quirky detail that might amuse you. Some resorts provide bathing machines, wheeled cabins that roll into the water, allowing swimmers to enter the ocean without being seen on the beach in their bathing costumes. These machines seem ridiculous to modern sensibilities, elaborate structures designed to preserve modesty in situations where modesty seems the least of concerns, but they reflect the deep anxiety of the 1840s Americans feel about exposed bodies and public judgment. Your swimming hole has no such machines and no such anxiety. This is a place for boys and young men to escape the heat and the work and the endless pressure of summer survival, to enjoy their bodies in water that asks nothing of them except that they float. You swim lazy laps from one side to the other, race your brother to a rock that juts from the centre, dive beneath the surface and open your eyes in murky darkness, where nothing exists except water and the muffled sound of your own heartbeat. Time passes differently here. The afternoon that stretched endlessly when you are working in the fields seems to compress and accelerate when you are swimming, hours vanishing into minutes, the sun moving across the sky faster than seems possible. Before you are ready, the light begins to shift, the shadows to lengthen, and you know that you must return before your absence is noticed, and consequences follow. You climb out of the water and lie on the bank, letting the air dry your skin while you stare at the sky and think about nothing in particular. The heat is still there, but it seems less oppressive now, as if the swimming has recalibrated your body's expectations. You have cheated summer, if only briefly, and the victory tastes sweet. Entertainment in this era is hard-won and often unofficial. Pleasures grabbed in moments between work rather than scheduled into calendars. There are no summer camps, no organised sports leagues, no vacation days set aside for recreation. There are only moments like this one, when the demands of survival temporarily relax their grip, and you can simply be a young person enjoying water on a hot day. You dress slowly, reluctant to leave, knowing that the farm and its obligations wait. Your brother and cousin dress too, and the three of you walk back through the trees, following the path you made coming in, returning to a world where work never ends and heat never relents. But you carry the memory of coolness with you, a small treasure that you will draw on later, when the night is hot and sleep will not come, when the harvest demands more than you feel capable of giving. You went swimming today, and for those minutes in the water, summer was not your enemy, but your playground. The tent rises from the meadow like a great white whale, its canvas sides flapping gently in whatever breeze exists this afternoon. Around it, hundreds of people have gathered, families from farms within a day's travel, town residents who walked out from the village, strangers from even further away who have come specifically for this event. This is a camp meeting, a religious revival, and it represents one of the most significant social and spiritual occasions of the American summer. You've been walking since before dawn, your family moving together along dusty roads, joining other families at crossroads and forks until your group swelled into something resembling a parade. Your mother carries food enough for 3 days, the duration of the meeting, packed in baskets that grow heavier with each mile. Your father carries bedding, tents, and the various supplies needed to establish a temporary camp in the meadow surrounding the main tent. Everyone carries something, even the youngest children, because this is not a journey anyone undertakes lightly. Camp meetings emerged in the early years of the 19th century as a uniquely American form of religious expression. They combine the frontier necessity of gathering people from scattered settlements with the evangelical fervour that has swept through American Protestantism. For 3 days or more, hundreds or even thousands of people live together in temporary community, attending religious services that continue from dawn until well past midnight, experiencing the collective intensity that comes from shared prayer and shared suffering. The shared suffering part is literal. This tent, and the meadow around it, offer no escape from summer heat. If anything, they concentrate it. Thousands of bodies gathered together, generating warmth, breathing out humid air, transforming the space into something resembling a sauna. People faint during services, overcome by heat and emotion, and the sheer physical strain of standing for hours while preachers exhort them to salvation. The fainting is considered part of the experience, evidence of the Holy Spirit's power moving through the congregation. You find a spot for your family's small tent, one of hundreds that now dot the meadow like mushrooms after rain. The arrangement is roughly organised, with families clustered by their home communities, but the overall effect is chaos. A temporary city that has sprung up overnight and will vanish just as quickly when the meeting ends. The preaching begins as the sun reaches its highest point, which seems like deliberately poor timing, until you realise that the organisers know exactly what they are doing. They want the congregation uncomfortable, want the heat and the exhaustion to break down the resistance that might otherwise prevent spiritual transformation. A cool, comfortable congregation might listen politely and then go home unchanged. A congregation that is physically suffering is primed for emotional release, ready to accept salvation as relief from multiple forms of torment. The preacher, a travelling minister whose name you will forget by next week but whose voice you will remember for years, speaks of hellfire in terms that seem redundant given the actual fire of summer. He describes damnation as eternal heat, endless suffering without the relief that September will eventually bring, and you think that you already understand this feeling, that you have been practicing for hell all summer long. Here is something that historians still argue about: the relationship between camp meetings and social reform. Some scholars emphasize the conservative aspects of revivalism, the emphasis on individual salvation rather than collective action, the reinforcement of traditional gender roles and racial hierarchies. Others point to the radical potential of camp meetings, spaces where African Americans and white Americans sometimes worshipped together, where women sometimes spoke publicly in ways that conventional society would forbid, where the intensity of religious experience could inspire challenges to existing social orders. What you experience listening to the preacher and watching the congregation respond is something that resists easy categorization. There is genuine spiritual fervor here, people seeking connection with the divine in the way that humans have sought such connection for thousands of years. There is also social bonding, the pleasure of being among others who share your beliefs and your struggles. There is entertainment. These preachers are performers, masters of their craft, and their sermons provide drama and excitement that ordinary life rarely offers. And there is heat. Always heat. Pressing down on the congregation like a physical presence, making every moment more intense, every emotion more vivid, every experience more memorable. You feel something building in your chest, something that might be religious conviction, or might be heat exhaustion, or might be both. The preacher's words wash over you, describing a God who sees your struggles and offers redemption, promising a heaven where the temperature is always perfect, and the harvest never fails, and death has no dominion. The person beside you, a stranger, someone from another farm, someone you will never see again, begins to weep, and you find yourself weeping too, tears mixing with sweat and running down your face. This is what camp meetings are for, you realise. They create conditions where normal defences collapse, where the facades we maintain in daily life cannot be sustained, where whatever is inside us must come out because keeping it in has become impossible. Night falls, but the meeting continues, the preaching shifting from threats of damnation to promises of salvation, the congregation moving from fear to hope. You find yourself standing, swaying, joining your voice to hymns that thousands of voices sing together, feeling part of something larger than yourself and your family and your farm. This is community in its most intense form, forged in shared suffering, expressed in shared worship. Tomorrow you will return to ordinary life, to the harvest, and the heat, and the endless daily struggle. But tonight you are not alone, and the weight of summer feels, if only briefly, like something you can bear. The newspaper arrives from town, already several days old, but still bearing news that sparks conversation and controversy. Among the advertisements for patent medicines and farm equipment, among the political commentary and the obituaries that seem longer in summer than in other seasons, there is a small notice that catches your mother's attention. The Grand Hotel at Saratoga Springs announces its summer season, promising mineral baths, elegant dining, and escape from the heat that afflicts ordinary mortals. Your mother reads this advertisement aloud, her voice carrying a mixture of longing and mockery. Saratoga Springs is for rich people, for families who can afford to abandon their homes and businesses for weeks at a time, for those whose summer work consists of being seen in the right places rather than bringing in the harvest. Your family will never visit Saratoga Springs, and everyone knows it, but there is a certain pleasure in imagining what such a life might be like. The wealthy in 1840s, America have discovered what will eventually be called summering, the practice of fleeing hot cities for cooler destinations, where the season can be endured in relative comfort. Saratoga Springs in New York, Newport in Rhode Island, the White Mountains of New Hampshire, these places have become summer colonies for the American elite, offering temperatures 10 or 20 degrees cooler than Philadelphia or New York City, along with social opportunities that make the expense worthwhile. The logic of summer resort development follows temperature gradients northward and upward. Mountains are cooler than valleys, a fact that your body understands even if the science of atmospheric cooling is unfamiliar. Northern latitudes receive less intense sunlight, making the same temperatures feel less oppressive. Seaside locations benefit from ocean breezes that carry cool air inland, moderating temperatures in ways that inland areas cannot match. The wealthy have the resources to follow this logic to its conclusions. They maintain summer homes in cool locations, or they rent accommodations at grand hotels that cater specifically to seasonal refugees from urban heat. Their summers are spent not working but socializing, not surviving but thriving, in environments that have been engineered to maximize comfort and minimize the suffering that ordinary Americans simply accept. Here is a quirky detail that illuminates the class dynamics of summer escape. Some wealthy families maintain entirely separate wardrobes for summer retreats, clothing lighter and more comfortable than what they would wear in the city, appropriate for the more relaxed social environment of resort life. A woman who would never appear in public in anything less than full formal dress might wear loose-fitting muslin gowns at Saratoga, her arms bare to the shoulder, her corset loosened or even removed. Summer resorts created space for freedoms that city life denied. Some families go further, leaving America entirely during the summer months. European travel, particularly to the milder climates of England and the cool mountains of Switzerland, appeals to those who have the means and the leisure. These families return in autumn with stories of alpine glaciers and British mists, of temperatures so pleasant that sleeping under blankets became possible, of a season that was enjoyable rather than endurable. You will never experience any of this, and the knowledge sits in your chest like a small cold stone. Your summer will be spent here, on this farm, working in fields and sleeping in rooms that never cool down, surviving rather than escaping, enduring rather than enjoying. The division between your life and the lives described in that newspaper advertisement seems vast, unbridgeable, a fact of existence as immutable as the heat itself. Historians still argue about the long-term effects of summer resort culture on American society. Some point to resorts as early sites of conspicuous consumption, places where the wealthy displayed their status through leisure, while the working classes laboured to provide the goods and services that made that leisure possible. Others note that resort culture eventually democratised, with the working classes eventually gaining access to beaches and mountains through public parks and affordable transportation, spreading the benefits of summer escape beyond the elite. But that democratisation lies in the future. For now, summer resorts are strictly for those who can afford them, and everyone else must make do with whatever relief their circumstances allow. Your mother folds the newspaper and sets it aside, her momentary indulgence in fantasy completed. There is work to do, always work, and dreaming about Saratoga Springs does not bring in the harvest, or preserve the vegetables, or tend the livestock. The wealthy may escape the heat, but your family must survive it, and survival does not leave time for extended daydreaming. You think about the people at those resorts, what they might be doing right now, what they might be eating, how they might be sleeping in rooms cooled by mountain breezes. You try to imagine a summer that is pleasant rather than punishing, a season spent in leisure rather than labour. The image wavers and dissolves, too foreign to maintain, too distant from anything you have actually experienced. Later, much later, when you are old and the summers of your youth have become memories retold to grandchildren, you will understand that this inequality, the gap between those who escaped and those who endured, shaped American society in ways that persist long after air conditioning made summer survivable for everyone. The wealthy learned to expect comfort, learned that suffering could be avoided through sufficient resources, while the working classes learned to endure, to accept discomfort as the natural state of existence. But that understanding lies far in the future. For now, you simply accept that your summer will be hard, that relief is not coming, that the work must be done regardless of how you feel about it. This is the lot of ordinary Americans in the 1840s, and you are nothing if not ordinary. The sun beats down on the cotton fields with an intensity that seems almost personal, as if the heat itself has singled out these rows and these workers for special punishment. You are not here, not physically present in the fields of the Deep South, but your consciousness hovers above the scene that your cousin's letter described, imagining what summer means for those whose circumstances are not merely difficult but actively cruel. Slavery shapes every aspect of southern summer in ways that cannot be understood without centering its horror. The same heat that makes your Pennsylvania farm uncomfortable makes plantation labor genuinely lethal, transforming the season of growing into a season of suffering that exceeds anything free farmers experience. The people working these cotton fields have no choice about their labor, no ability to rest when the heat becomes unbearable, no option to retreat to shade when their bodies begin to fail. Your cousin, who married a man from Virginia before moving north, has written to your mother about what she witnessed during her years in the South. The letters are careful, guarded, mail can be opened, opinions can be dangerous, but they convey enough for you to understand that the summer you are experiencing bears no comparison to what enslaved people endure. Field labour in the cotton South begins before dawn, the same early morning strategy that your family uses, but where your family chooses when to rest, when to retreat, when to declare the heat too dangerous for continued work, enslaved people have no such choices. Overseers determine work hours, and those hours extend through the worst heat of the day, through temperatures that exceed 100 degrees in the shade, through conditions that kill people with terrible regularity. The cotton plant itself seems designed to maximize summer suffering. It requires cultivation during the hottest months, weeding and thinning and pest control that must happen precisely when temperatures peak. The plants grow low to the ground, forcing workers to bend constantly, to expose their backs to direct sunlight for hours at a time. The leaves and boles provide no shade, no relief, only row after row of green stretching toward horizons that shimmer with heat. Water breaks are granted or withheld at the overseer's discretion, creating a power dynamic where basic human needs become tools of control. Workers who displease overseers may be denied water, left to labour through the heat, with only the moisture they began the day with, their bodies failing as dehydration progresses from uncomfortable to dangerous to deadly. Here is a fact that historians have documented with terrible precision. More enslaved people died in summer than in any other season. Heat stroke, dehydration, diseases that flourished in warm weather, accidents caused by exhaustion and impaired judgment. Summer was the deadliest time to be enslaved in the American South, a season when the intersection of forced labour and extreme temperature created conditions that bordered on genocide. The clothing provided to enslaved workers was often inadequate even for normal wear, and summer made inadequacy into agony. Cotton shirts and trousers, when they were provided at all, became saturated with sweat and offered no protection from sun. Many workers laboured with minimal clothing, their skin exposed to sunlight that burned and heat that cooked, their bodies left to manage thermal stress with no assistance from the people who claimed to own them. Shelter was equally insufficient. The cabins provided for enslaved families were typically small, poorly ventilated and crowded, conditions that replicated the worst aspects of urban tenement living, while adding the isolation of rural plantation life. A single cabin might house a dozen people, their combined body heat making interior temperatures even higher than the suffocating air outside. Sleep was nearly impossible, rest was inadequate, and workers began each day already exhausted from the night before. Historians still argue about the extent to which southern slaveholders understood the lethality of their labour practices. Some evidence suggests that plantation owners attempted to protect their investment by modifying work schedules during the worst heat, recognising that dead workers produced no cotton. Other evidence suggests that short-term productivity concerns overrode long-term survival considerations, that overseers were rewarded for immediate output regardless of the human cost. What seems clear is that the southern economy was built on summer labour that killed people, that the cotton and sugar and rice that fueled American prosperity came at a price, measured in human suffering, that your comfortable Pennsylvania farm cannot begin to approximate. You think about this as you work through your own summer day, aware that your labour is chosen, your rest is available, your survival is probable. The heat that presses against you is the same heat that kills people in Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi. But the conditions that surround that heat make all the difference in the world. Your cousin's letters have changed how you understand summer, how you understand labour, how you understand the nation that contains both your relatively fortunate existence and the systematic horror unfolding in the South. The heat connects everything. The same sun shines on Pennsylvania farms and Carolina plantations, but what that heat means depends entirely on whether you are free to escape it or enslaved to endure it. The abolition movement is growing, gathering strength in the northern states where people like you are beginning to understand that the heat of summer is only one of many ways that enslaved people suffer. But understanding feels inadequate, too small a response to the enormity of the evil that your country perpetuates in pursuit of cotton and profit and power. Summer will end for you. September will bring relief, and October will bring cool nights, and eventually winter will arrive with its own challenges that seem almost pleasant compared to July and August. For enslaved people, summer ends too, but another summer always follows and another after that, until death provides the only escape that the system allows. The elder who lives at the edge of the county, a man your parents visit rarely and speak of with cautious respect, knows things about summer that your family has forgotten or never learned. He is indigenous, one of the few remaining members of the people who lived in this region for generations before European settlers arrived, and his knowledge of the land extends back through time in ways that your recent ancestors cannot match. You visit him with your father, ostensibly to trade for herbs that he gathers and prepares, but really because your father values the conversations that happen during these visits. Conversations about farming, about weather, about the old ways of doing things that sometimes turn out to be better than the new ways. The old man sits in the shade of his cabin, which is positioned differently than any farmhouse you have seen. The doors face directions your father's house does not face. The roof extends in ways that seem odd, until you notice how perfectly the shadows fall across the sitting area even at noon. This cabin was built with summer in mind, built by someone who understood exactly how the sun moves across the sky, and how buildings can be positioned to escape its worst effects. Indigenous peoples of the eastern woodlands had developed sophisticated strategies for surviving summer heat, long before Europeans arrived, strategies that colonizers often ignored or dismissed, even when they were demonstrably superior to European approaches. The old man's cabin represents an accumulation of knowledge that your own culture is only beginning to rediscover. Location matters more than construction, he explains, speaking slowly in English that carries traces of a language your father cannot understand. The best building site is one where summer breezes flow naturally, where shade from existing trees reduces the need for artificial cooling, where the slope of the land channels heat away rather than trapping it. European settlers chose building sites based on proximity to water and roads, ignoring solar orientation and airflow patterns that indigenous peoples had considered for generations. Food preservation, too, followed different logic. The old man describes methods that your family does not use, drying techniques that preserve nutrients better than smoking, fermentation processes that produce foods your ancestors never imagined, storage strategies that take advantage of natural features like springs and caves that maintain cool temperatures year-round. Some of these methods have been adopted by settlers over the years, becoming folk wisdom without acknowledgement of their indigenous origins. Here is a quirky detail that might surprise you. Many indigenous peoples of this region traditionally adjusted their clothing dramatically for summer, wearing minimal coverage during the hottest months in ways that European settlers found scandalous, but which made obvious biological sense. The heavy clothing that colonizers brought from Europe was ill-suited to American summers, but cultural norms prevented most settlers from adopting the lighter dress that indigenous peoples had developed over centuries. Historians still argue about the extent of knowledge transfer between indigenous peoples and European settlers during the colonial period and beyond. Some evidence suggests significant adoption of indigenous practices, with European Americans learning agricultural techniques, food preservation methods, and survival strategies from their native neighbours. Other evidence suggests that prejudice and cultural arrogance prevented most settlers from recognising or acknowledging indigenous knowledge, even when their own practices were demonstrably inferior. The old man shows your father a plant that grows in the woods near his cabin, a species that your father does not recognise. The leaves, when chewed, produce a cooling sensation in the mouth, a mild numbing that reduces the perception of heat without actually lowering body temperature. It is not a cure for summer, but it is a relief, a way of managing discomfort that your family's European traditions never discovered. Your father takes samples of the plant, promising to try cultivating it near your own farmhouse. The old man shrugs. The plant grows where it wants to grow, he says, and transplanting rarely succeeds. But he appreciates the gesture, the acknowledgement that his knowledge has value, that the old ways are not entirely obsolete. As you leave, you look back at the cabin, noting again its perfect positioning, its careful relationship to sun and shade and breeze. Your own family's farmhouse sits where it sits, because your grandfather built it there, following patterns inherited from European ancestors who had never experienced American heat. The old man's cabin sits where it sits, because someone understood exactly how the sun moves, and the wind blows, and the heat accumulates, someone who had lived on this land long enough to learn its rhythms. There is a lesson here, you think, about the value of accumulated knowledge, about the dangers of dismissing wisdom simply because it comes from unfamiliar sources. Your family has survived in America for several generations, but your understanding of the land remains shallow compared to those who called it home for thousands of years. The heat continues, as it always does in summer, pressing down on you as you walk back toward the farm. But you carry new knowledge with you, knowledge of plants and positioning and practices that might make future summers slightly more bearable. The old man has shared what he knows, as his people have always shared with those who approached with respect rather than conquest. You will remember this visit, you decide, will think about it when the heat becomes unbearable, will wonder what else you might learn if you had more time and more opportunity to listen. The land holds secrets that your people are only beginning to understand, and summer reveals those secrets more clearly than any other season. The year is different now, 1863 instead of the 1840s you have been inhabiting, and the summer has taken on dimensions of horror that peacetime could never match. You are marching through Virginia, one of tens of thousands of soldiers moving toward a destination you have not been told, carrying equipment that weighs more than you would have believed possible, suffering through heat that military historians will later describe as among the worst conditions American soldiers have ever faced. The Civil War has transformed summer from a season of agricultural labour into a season of military suffering, and the transformation has proved deadly in ways that no one anticipated when the shooting started. More soldiers are dying from heat-related causes than from enemy bullets, a fact that commanders know but cannot effectively address, because the strategic necessities of war do not pause for weather. You march during daylight hours because that is when marching happens, when columns can be maintained and directions can be followed and units can be kept together. The heat is worse during daylight, obviously, but the alternative, night marches that result in chaos and separation, and soldiers wandering off to die alone in unfamiliar countryside, is worse still. So you march in the sun, and the sun does its work. The wool uniform you wear is a masterpiece of inappropriate clothing, designed for European climates by quartermasters who never considered American summers. Blue wool for Union soldiers, grey wool for Confederates, both sides dressed for autumn while fighting through July. The jackets alone are nearly intolerable, heavy and hot and designed to be worn fully buttoned because military discipline requires uniformity even when uniformity is killing people. Your canteen holds perhaps a quart of water, enough for a few hours of easy walking in cool weather, laughably inadequate for a full day's march in heat that routinely exceeds 100 degrees. Refilling opportunities are uncertain. Rivers and streams appear on maps but may be dry or contaminated or held by enemy forces. Soldiers learn to drink when water is available, rather than when thirst demands. But this learning comes at the cost of casualties that could have been prevented. Heat stroke takes soldiers in patterns that military physicians are only beginning to understand. The strongest often fall first, having pushed themselves harder and generated more internal heat than their smaller comrades. Men who seemed fine minutes ago suddenly collapse, their faces red, their skin dry and hot, their consciousness fading before anything can be done. Field hospitals set up to treat battle wounds find themselves overwhelmed by heat casualties instead. Here is a fact that shapes your understanding of this war. The Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia both suffered more heat-related casualties in the summer of 1863 than they suffered from combat in many smaller engagements. Heat was a weapon that neither side could deploy intentionally, but that both sides suffered from equally. An enemy more reliable and less discriminating than any human opponent. The Battle of Gettysburg, which will occur in a few days if the date you have been told is accurate, will be fought in temperatures that hover around 90 degrees, hot but not exceptional, manageable compared to the marches that preceded it. Soldiers who survived the heat of the approach will fight and die in conditions that seem almost pleasant by comparison, though pleasant is not a word that anyone will use to describe those 3 days. And historians still argue about the extent to which heat affected strategic decisions during the Civil War. Some evidence suggests that commanders scheduled battles with temperature in mind, seeking to engage during cooler periods when troops would be more effective. Other evidence suggests that strategic imperatives overrode all other considerations, that battles happened when and where they had to happen regardless of weather conditions. What seems clear is that summer imposed costs on both sides that neither had anticipated when the war began. The romantic vision of war, cavalry charges and heroic stands and bands playing while soldiers marched, collided with the reality of heat that killed men as surely as bullets, that sapped strength and morale and will to fight, that transformed military operations into survival exercises where simply reaching the battlefield became an achievement. You continue marching one foot in front of the other, the monotony of movement broken only by the occasional command to rest, to drink, to check on comrades who may be failing. The army stretches before you and behind you, a great blue snake crawling across the Virginia landscape, leaving a trail of discarded equipment and collapsed soldiers and graves hastily dug by those too weak to carry the bodies further. This is summer at war, and it is worse than anything you experienced on the farm, worse than harvest labour, worse than kitchen heat, worse than the accumulated suffering of peaceful summers that now seem almost pleasant in comparison. The same sun that ripened wheat in Pennsylvania is now killing soldiers in Virginia, indifferent to which side they fight for, indifferent to whether this war ends in Union victory or Confederate independence. You will survive this march, you tell yourself, because the alternative is unthinkable. You will survive the battle that follows and the summer that surrounds it, and eventually, please God, eventually, you will go home to summers that are merely difficult rather than deadly. The column moves forward, and you move with it. One more body in the endless blue river of soldiers that the heat is slowly evaporating. The machine sits in the corner of the factory floor, a complicated assembly of pipes and valves and mysterious chambers that your employer calls an ice machine. It does not work, not consistently anyway, but when it does work, when all the valves are aligned correctly and the pressure is maintained and nothing breaks down, it produces something that seems almost miraculous. Ice, manufactured rather than harvested, created by human ingenuity rather than gathered from frozen lakes. The year is now 1870, and the world you inhabit is changing faster than anyone could have predicted. The Civil War is over, the nation is reuniting in fits and starts, and technological progress that seemed impossible a generation ago is becoming reality. Air conditioning is still decades away, but its foundations are being laid, one innovation at a time, and you are watching one of those innovations struggle toward viability. Dr. John Gorey, a physician in Florida, built an ice-making machine in the 1840s to cool the rooms of patients suffering from tropical diseases. His invention used compressed air, expanding it rapidly to produce cooling that could then freeze water. The principle was sound. It would eventually underpin all mechanical refrigeration, but the execution was unreliable, and Gorey died before his invention achieved commercial success. Others have continued the work. Jacob Perkins patented a vapor compression refrigeration cycle in 1834, though he never built a successful commercial machine. Ferdinand Carré developed an ammonia-based system in France that showed more promise. American inventors have experimented with various approaches, each one bringing the dream of manufactured cold slightly closer to reality. The machine in your factory represents the state of the art in 1870, meaning it works sometimes, under ideal conditions, when maintained by skilled operators who understand its temperamental requirements. Your employer purchased it to experiment with year-round ice production, hoping to break the seasonal dependence that makes ice expensive in summer and worthless in winter. The experiment is not going well, but it is going, and the ice that emerges on successful days demonstrates that the concept is sound even if the execution remains problematic. Here is what the machine accomplishes when it works. It compresses ammonia gas, raising its temperature through the compression. The hot compressed gas then passes through coils, where it releases heat to the surrounding air, cooling and condensing into liquid ammonia. The liquid ammonia then flows through an expansion valve, where the sudden drop in pressure causes it to evaporate rapidly, absorbing heat from its surroundings and producing temperatures cold enough to freeze water. This is the principle that will eventually cool homes and offices and entire cities, but translating principle into practice requires solving engineering problems that 1870 technology can barely address. The valves leak. The ammonia is toxic, creating danger for workers. The compressors break down. The entire system consumes enormous amounts of fuel, making the ice it produces almost as expensive as natural ice shipped from New England. Historians still argue about who deserves credit for inventing mechanical refrigeration. Gorey, Perkins, Carré, or later inventors who actually made the technology practical. The truth is that no single person invented refrigeration. It emerged from the accumulated work of dozens of inventors across multiple countries, each one solving one piece of the puzzle, each one building on work that came before. What you're watching in this factory in 1870 is one small step in a process that will eventually transform human life. The machine that struggles to produce a few blocks of ice per day will evolve into systems that cool entire buildings. The ammonia that makes workers nervous will be replaced by safer refrigerants. The fuel-hungry compressors will become efficient enough to run continuously at reasonable cost. Air conditioning, when it finally arrives in the early 20th century, will change everything. Where people live, how they work, what they build, how they sleep. Cities in the American South and Southwest will become habitable year-round, transforming population patterns that have been stable for centuries. Factories will operate at full capacity regardless of season. Homes will maintain comfortable temperatures through the worst heat waves, reducing the summer mortality that has plagued humanity since the beginning of recorded history. But you cannot see that far into the future. You can only see this machine, this experiment, this small victory over heat that your employer is celebrating despite its obvious limitations. Ice has been made, not harvested. Cold has been created, not gathered. The impossible has become possible even if it has not yet become practical. You stand in the factory, feeling the residual coolness that the machine's operation has created in this corner of the building. It is not air conditioning. The temperature has dropped perhaps 5 degrees from the surrounding area, barely noticeable in the overall heat of the factory. But it is something. It is evidence that heat can be fought with technology, that summer's dominion is not absolute, that human ingenuity may someday achieve what prayer and endurance have never accomplished. The future is coming, one invention at a time, one failed experiment at a time, one partially successful machine at a time. Summer will not always mean what it means now. Comfort may someday be available to everyone, not just the wealthy who can afford ice, or the northern residents who benefit from cooler climates. You'll probably not live to see that future fully realised. The machines that cool your grandchildren's homes are still decades away from practical deployment, but you have seen enough to know that the future is possible, that the summer hell your ancestors endured is not the eternal condition of human existence. The machine chugs and hisses behind you, producing ice drop by precious drop. Progress continues. The first cool breeze arrives on a Tuesday afternoon in late August, sliding through the open window with a gentleness that makes you stop whatever you're doing and simply stand there, feeling it move across your skin. After months of heat, months of suffering and adaptation and survival, this breeze carries news of a world you had almost forgotten existed, a world where the air moves and the nights cool and the endless pressure of summer begins to lift. September is coming. You can feel it in the quality of the light, which has shifted from the harsh white of July to something softer, more golden. You can feel it in the angle of the sun, which no longer beats directly overhead but approaches from a slant that speaks of seasons turning. You can feel it in your own body, which seems to recognise before your conscious mind that the worst is over, that survival has been achieved, that another summer has been endured. The harvest is nearly complete, the wheat brought in, the vegetables preserved, the preparations for winter well underway. Your family has lost no one this year, a fact that registers as genuine triumph in an era when summer claimed so many. The Henderson farm was not so fortunate. Mrs. Henderson died in early August, the doctor unable to determine exactly what carried her off, but everyone suspecting the heat. Your family attended the funeral, standing in the churchyard under a sun that seemed almost mocking in its continued intensity, watching as summer claimed another victim. But you survived. Your parents survived, your siblings survived, and the farm produced enough to see everyone through the coming winter. By the standards of 1840s rural America, this is success, even if it does not feel triumphant. You have endured what the season demanded, and now the season is releasing its grip. The nights are growing longer, the darkness arriving earlier each evening and lingering later each morning. This darkness, which would seem gloomy in other contexts, feels almost celebratory now. Proof that the sun's dominion is not eternal, that the earth continues its tilt away from the intensity that has defined the past 3 months. You find yourself welcoming nightfall with an enthusiasm that borders on religious, grateful for each hour of darkness as a gift. Sleep has improved gradually as the temperatures have dropped. The nights that were torture in July have become merely uncomfortable in late August, and soon, any day now, they will become actually pleasant, cool enough that blankets might be needed, comfortable enough that rest will truly restore rather than merely interrupt waking misery. You anticipate that first blanket night the way you might anticipate a feast, a reunion with comfort that has been absent for far too long. The quality of your thoughts has shifted too, in ways that you notice only in retrospect. The fog of heat exhaustion, the constant low-level impairment that summer imposed, is beginning to lift. You find yourself thinking more clearly, remembering more accurately, planning more effectively. It is as though your brain, like your body, is emerging from a season of diminished capacity into something closer to normal function. Historians will eventually document what you're experiencing, the cognitive effects of heat, the measurable impairment in mental function that elevated temperatures produce. But you do not need scientific documentation to know that your mind works better when it is not being slowly cooked. The relief you feel is proof enough. You sit on the porch as evening approaches, watching the shadows lengthen across the farmyard, feeling the air cool in ways that were impossible just weeks ago. The cicadas are quieter now, their chorus diminished as the insects that survive begin preparing for their own winter dormancy. The birds that filled summer mornings with song are growing restless, some already beginning the migrations that will carry them south to escape the cold that you welcome. This is the rhythm of the year, you realize: endurance followed by relief, suffering followed by respite, summer followed by autumn, followed by winter, followed by spring. Each season brings its own challenges, its own demands, its own forms of survival that must be learned and practiced and passed down through generations. Summer is the hardest, perhaps, but it is not the only hard season, and the skills that carry you through it are the same skills that will carry you through what comes next. You think about everyone who did not survive this summer. Mrs. Henderson, the babies in the churchyard, the unnamed strangers whose deaths appeared in newspaper notices without ever touching your life directly. You think about the soldiers who marched and died in heat that was more terrible than anything you experienced, their suffering measured in ways that civilian hardship cannot match. You think about the enslaved people whose summer continues regardless of the calendar, whose relief will not come with September because their oppression is not seasonal. Summer in 1840s, America was not merely hot. It was a test, a trial, a season that revealed what human beings could endure and what they could not. You've passed this year's test, not through heroism, but through persistence, not through triumph, but through simple, stubborn refusal to quit. This is what survival looks like, not glorious, not dramatic, but real. The breeze continues to move through the evening air, carrying the promise of cooler days and restful nights. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with air that does not feel like soup, and you allow yourself a moment of something that might be gratitude. Summer is ending. You're still here. The night deepens around you, soft as a blessing, dark as rest. The stars appear one by one, pinpoints of light in a sky that holds no more threat, only peace. You feel your breathing slow, your muscles uncoil, your mind release the tension that summer demanded. The worst is over. The harvest is in. The people you love are sleeping safely in rooms that are finally, blessedly cool. Tomorrow will bring its own work, its own demands, but tomorrow is not summer's anymore. Tomorrow belongs to autumn, to the gentle season, to the time of completion and rest. Let your eyes grow heavy now. Let the breeze carry away whatever remains of the day's worries. You have survived what needed surviving. You have endured what needed enduring. Now there is only sleep, and sleep is coming, soft and welcome as the first cool night. Rest now. Dream of winter snow and spring flowers and summers yet to come. Dream of ice that stays frozen and nights that stay cool and all the impossible comforts that the future may bring. Dream whatever you wish, because summer cannot touch you here in this darkness, in this peace. The world turns, the seasons change, and you, weary traveller through heat and time, have earned this rest. Sleep well.